Pete George, and we are live on Game Changers with Vicki Abelson. Our guest tonight is Leland Sklar. Woo!
Am I allowed to dance?
Yes.
Nobody wants to see that. I just want to watch you.
Love this song.
It's fabulous. So funky.
Daryl Sturmer. Guitar.
Fuck the guitar.
Oh yeah. Love you.
Although that does sound pretty fucking good. So funky.
Last verse.
You can do this all night long. I'll be happy.
Me too.
Ay, 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 ay. I'd give you a standing ovation, but my hips would be in the shot. Oh my god.
It has a good beat and I can dance to it.
Oh my god, Lee, welcome Lee Sklar.
I am so thrilled to be here.
I am so happy that you're here. All right, we're gonna go and we're gonna look and make sure that we're actually on here. I don't like to look down and do this stuff.
No, that's
during
good.
The show.
It's good to
But
check.
We're just gonna get the shot in so that, and then we can also say hello to some people because
Great.
a lot of people are watching to see you today. And
It's a desperate medium.
Except none of those bad people, I'm sure, are watching.
No.
They don't.
They know
see,
better.
Look at how much love you're getting.
Oh,
look
my
at this.
God.
Everybody's throwing
My
up.
God,
People are throwing up the love.
Looks like Valentine hearts, candy hearts.
It does. Christina Guzman saying it sounds great. Tony Vincent, hi. Warren Sellers, hi. Randy, hey.
This is really cool.
You know,
I love this. I'm so glad that we got to do this.
I am too. And
Yeah.
you know, I don't know if you remember this. Well, you wouldn't remember this.
I remember
remember this, but I don't either. But you were doing a benefit, and it was John Guillotin was the
musical director.
Yes, and who was it for? I don't remember. It was
at the
Bish did it. Bish
at the
was
Saban.
at the Saban.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. What's
See,
the
I
guy?
can't remember either. Dionne Warwick was there.
John James. He's a musician who developed, I think, like cerebral palsy.
Yeah,
He's got some issues going on. And Shaka Khan came down.
Yes.
What was his name? I loved him. English guy.
Oh yeah.
In the early days, he had like spiky red. Red hair.
Yeah.
Oh God.
Oh God, this is really bad
Yeah.
when you put a couple of old people together and ask them.
Well,
for
no,
their
when you have
names.
people that have a lot of history, it all starts to get. Yeah, I really loved his music too. I'll remember. I'll call you in the wee hours of the morning.
Actually,
Howard Jones.
Thank you. I was going to say it'll
God,
probably come to
thank you, thank you. I'm
Thank
gonna
you.
put
There you go. You get a
put
chip.
a chip in my eye here.
It was a great show. It was amazing.
I loved it, and it was
Mickey
a great
was there
cause.
too. Mickey
Yeah.
Owens, yeah. It was a great
Yeah.
show, great cause, and I came up to you afterwards, as I'm wont to do.
You said you were a good girl, and thought I was Santa, and you were giving me your Christmas list.
Well, I did ask to sit on your lap, but that's a whole nother story.
Okay.
And no, but I said, oh, Mickey did my show, and this one did my show, and Steve did my show, and you were lovely. And somehow, and you know, my only way to contact you was through Facebook in those days, and
Yeah.
I don't blame you if you don't read those things.
No, I actually read everything.
Do you?
It's just stuff gets buried and loaded down in there.
Okay, so let's talk about that for a minute
Okay.
since we're here. So you're very outspoken,
Yes.
and so Facebook gives you a little holiday once in a while.
Yeah, they'll take me and they'll say it's time to put that little pointed hat on and sit and face the corner.
So how long do they make you face
It's
the
usually
corner?
30 days.
Get out of here.
No, 30 days. And there's no explanation as to why.
Is it usually because somebody
It's
is
because
ratting
somebody
you out?
trolled me and they complained enough. And I think there's probably some kind of a logarithm or something that then boots you off. And there's no recourse. I mean, it's not like there's a trial. Like,
Have you tried to like, because if you hit that support help thing,
no,
it doesn't
that's
matter.
completely nonsense.
Yeah.
Or sometimes it'll come back and say, we've reviewed your case.
And
But nothing's changed,
Oh.
and they haven't given you an answer as to what's actually happened.
okay,
But,
so tell me what that's like to be in Facebook hell.
it's so. I had a life before Facebook,
Right.
so I just moved back into that life. The only thing I really love Facebook for
Mm-hmm.
is I've hooked up with a ton of people that
You have
would
to
have
be
been really
careful
hard,
using that
really
word.
hard to hook up with.
You have to use
oh,
that,
I've been able to reconnect with a lot of
Yes.
people,
Mm-hmm.
and plus, I mean, I've been really fortunate because of my career. I have people that I talk to in Afghanistan, in India, in Japan, in Argentina. I mean, all over the world. And through Facebook, it really made it a pretty easy thing to do and track down old friends.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of aspects of Facebook that I find really appalling.
Mm-hmm.
And if I ever met Mark Zuckerberg, I'd probably be in jail. You know? But it's one of those things that I really appreciate the social aspect of it. I like being able to really discuss things that are going on in the world with people, but also I've used it as a format to, when I discover some great music, new music and stuff, I'll turn people onto it. Like I've had people say to me, "Who's your favorite bass player?" Expecting me to say McCartney or these people, and I go, well, actually, probably my favorite bass player his name is Reinat Ibragimov. And
Okay, tell me more.
Reinat is was the principal bassist with the London Symphony Orchestra.
Wow.
And he is probably one of the most staggering upright bass players I've ever seen in my life. And a couple
Have you met him?
I never met him. He's a young guy, and a few years ago he had a stroke, so he can't play anymore.
Oh my.
He might be teaching. And his daughter, Alina, is to violin what he is to string bass. And there's videos on YouTube
Wow.
of them. And the first time I saw him play, it took my breath away.
Did you ever get to let him know that?
I wrote to him a couple of times. I think it got to him, but you're never quite sure
Right.
what's going to who
Right.
when you're using these formats, because it's not like it's a personal thing
right.
and all that. But and there's so many people, and I just love being able to kind of move the arts along, because the arts are being so denigrated in this contemporary society we're in, that any chance to turn people on to painters and singers and writers and stuff, it's really a great format.
And you do use it.
I figure if this continues to be a real pain in the ass for me in terms of them coming after me because I got a big target on my back, then everybody said at this point, then just do a blog, and that I can control myself. But I really like the format of this. I don't like Instagram, because that's really like for showing pictures of your breakfast and things like that. I like a long format discussion, not having to go in the same with Twitter.
Well, it's like a cocktail party. See, I find Twitter is like 100 million people whacking off at the same time.
Yeah.
Nobody's really paying attention to anybody else.
Yeah, it's
But
all about
Facebook,
you.
We're really having a conversation.
I love, so on that level, I love it, and I really I try to. And the thing I also learned a long time ago, because I was a latecomer to technology. Everybody would say, "Oh, you got to get a computer; you'll be on it all day." I go, "You just said the wrong thing." But I finally, when I got into it, I figured now figure it out and do it. And the one thing that's so obvious with things like Facebook is it's content driven. And I know guys that go, "Oh, nobody ever comes to my page." And I go, "Well, how often do you post?" And stuff. And they go, "Like once a month." I go, "Duh." I said, "I post things several times a day." And I answer everybody. Everybody keeps thinking, because I know a lot of guys that have an assistant that does all their
Or
Facebook.
they hold court. They just post something and then they never come back.
Yeah.
It's about the conversation. I hate that.
Yeah.
It's about the conversation.
Yeah, I love the dialogue. And there's a lot of times where I ask people, I said, I want to be educated, especially people of diverse opinions from me. I said, explain to me, in really logical, documented terms, based in fact, what we can talk about. And generally, that usually closes the door.
Okay, so that's what I wanted to ask you. So when you're you're allowing for other opinions.
Oh, I absolutely encourage diversity of opinion.
See, as soon as they start to name call.
Yeah, gone.
Then I send
they're
them
gone.
away.
They're gone.
That I don't
They
do.
go to the. Bill Mooney is a friend of mine, and I always say, just send them to the cornfield. Yeah, just send them to the cornfield. I'm not a know-all. I don't know everything. I'd like to learn, and especially when there's people of diverse opinion, I'd really like to know what drives their thought process.
So if someone starts to come at you and they start to get not in the facts, but
they're quoting Fox News and
is this
Sean
when
Hannity.
Is this when you get in trouble? Do you think?
I'm sure. I'm sure, because there's certain people that have come on there that I can just tell that this person is going to be bad news, and people keep saying you've got to just go through your friends list and get rid of it. I said, well, my friends list was cut off like the first 2 weeks that I joined Facebook, because I didn't know they cut you off at 5,000. So I was just hitting, accept. But I've got about 83,000 people now following me on there, which is just twice as much as my dogs had, and they were sneaking up on me because they were over 40. They were over 40,000
Your dogs
followers.
are fantastic.
Yeah, I know.
Oh,
so it's one of those situations that. I really think dialogue is important in this day and age, but I really want dialogue that's reasonable dialogue, that is a dialogue and not just somebody coming at me going, I know your touring schedule, we're going to come get you.
Oh, come on, does that
No,
happen?
I've had threats like that.
Have you had people on the road, because they know your politics from Facebook, have people on the road, has that happened to you?
I've only had a couple of guys come up to me at gigs and go, so I love your playing, but man, I really hate your politics. If they do that, it's fine. But when somebody starts really threatening you, and then I'll say back to them, I say, yeah, as soon as you finish the Ovaltine your mom just brought you in, and you've got your drop-back jammies on, and you're playing video games in the basement, jerking off to Space Invaders or something. These guys, everybody's brave behind a screen.
Yeah.
But I said, bring it on. Nobody ever does. But I would say, for the most part, I'm usually preaching to the choir.
Yeah.
Because most of the people that
Although,
come
how
on,
many people have you banned, would you say?
It'd be probably between 3,000 and 4,000, something like that. But, over a course of time,
Right.
it's one of those things that you end up with people that really come on and they're vehement. I mean, I've had guys that really get ugly with me, and they really get, threatening and calling me all kinds of names. It's usually the people that go, the kind of stuff, I'll accept if somebody, comes on and says, why don't you just shut the fuck up and just play your bass? And I'll say to them, I would give up bass in a second to have a better world.
Wow,
I mean,
I would
absolutely. I think that we're in very dire times right now, and I think that the most important thing is to really be proactive about saving this planet.
Are you?
The planet.
Are you optimistic? Are you hopeful? Or
I'm scared shitless.
Okay, because Evan Handler from Sex and the City, Evan?
Yeah.
When I interviewed him a couple days after the election, and he's like, we are going to suffer this for the next 100 years. Our lives are just basically ruined. He was just in.
I think to repair the damage that's been done. It's kind of like when they talk about fluorocarbons in the ozone. The thing is, I read an article, and it takes 10 years. When somebody sprays a can that's toxic to the atmosphere, it takes 10 years for that spray to hit the top of the ozone layer and do any damage. So if we stop today, right at this moment, there's still 10 years of stuff going on. If we get rid of this administration and all the corruption that's taking place right now, there's so much damage has been done on a global basis. Because I just finished touring the world with Phil Collins. Everywhere I went, from South America to Europe to Asia to Australia, New Zealand, everybody goes, what the hell has happened to America?
God, I'm laughing.
Yeah, it's beyond tragic, and to repair this and really have our place in the world intact again is going to take a long time, because nobody trusts the system anymore over here, and the incredible amount of lying and stuff that's taking place. I don't want to have our hang be all about this, but like on my bass, I've got this big resist sticker, and the response, like when we played Puerto Rico, and that went up on a 50-foot screen right after Trump was throwing paper towels to the people to help them. The crowd went crazy, and I had guys coming up to me saying, look, we were playing San Juan, and San Juan was put together, pretty quickly, because that's really the center when people go to Puerto Rico. But a bunch of the stagehands were going out daily to other ends of the island and helping. And they said, man, it's still a complete disaster.
How recently were you there?
We were there probably 2 years ago. And now they're suffering because they just had the earthquake went through. So, but it's our place in the global community has been kind of almost
irreparable? No.
Yeah, it kind of, let's just say it's screwed.
Yeah.
And it breaks my heart, because I've traveled the world for so many years where we were kind of the bright beacon on the hill, and now we're that kind of spent lump of coal at the base of the hill. And it's really sad, and it didn't have to happen. But there's a lot of bullshit going on out there.
Okay, so let's go back to Lee as a younger guy. We were talking before we went on the air about... Oi!
Oi!
We were talking about being politically active, which you were. I was back in the day. Okay, so you grew up here.
Yeah.
California, Southern California.
Yeah.
Your parents, what did your father do?
My dad was kind of a gypsy. He probably, in the course of my life, probably had about 40 businesses.
Oh, wow. Like what?
Swimming pool cleaner, loading trucks for UPS, window tinning.
Was he musical?
He played a little saxophone when I was a baby, and he said that encouraged my crying, so they didn't do it that much. And my mom played a little bit of piano, but more than anything, I came from a very left-wing upbringing, which was great. Because when there were the big anti-war marches, my dad was like right there marching in it too.
I love that.
But it was one of these things that their musical tastes were incredibly eclectic.
Okay, so like, what did you grow up with in the house?
Everything. I mean, opera, Martin Denny, Thelonious Monk.
Did you like it all?
I loved it all.
You loved it all.
I loved it all. I mean, they really exposed me. And for a brief story on how I got into all this in the first place, my parents used to watch the Liberace TV show.
Of course they did.
And
Lawrence Welk?
Well, Liberace especially.
Wow.
And I would sit, kind of sneak around the corner and watch them, because it was on later in the evening. And this was when I was probably about 4 and 5. Now, we did have a piano in the house, so... But I would see this guy in his tuxedo and all this stuff. Then he was a fine pianist. But, you know, the whole shtick with the candelabra, and his brother George would come out and play violin. And that really motivated me to play piano. And so I started studying piano when I was 5. And
your choice or your parents'?
Well, it was in the house, and,
okay.
and you know, I just, and I was really digging Liberace. And so I started studying, and by the time I was 8, I had won some awards from the Hollywood Bowl Association as like the outstanding young pianist in town. But by the time I was 12, I was pretty burned out. I was like doing all kinds of recitals and performances. And
so you were sort of so it didn't matter what instrument you were playing, you had the music in you.
Yeah, I think so. I think so. But when I went to Birmingham. When I went to Birmingham Junior High School, it was a junior high school and high school. It was a 6-year school at that time before they split off the junior high school. And the music teacher there, his name was Ted Lynn. And
I love that you remember that.
Oh no! To me, I owe my career to Ted Lynn. Oh. And I hooked up with him before he passed away from cancer a few years back. Got a great finger shot from him.
Nice.
And he was
we'll talk
he
about
was great.
The
yeah, we'll get into that. But when I went in there, I kind of went in with the attitude, "Here I am. Your pianist is here." And he said, "There's like 50 kids that play piano. We need a string bass player." And I said,
"Okay, wait.
What's that?"
Stop 1 second. You had confidence. Do you think you had confidence because your parents supported and encouraged? Like, where did that come? Were you always confident?
I've probably been confident with a tremendous amount of self-doubt and self-deprecation. And so, like I'm like, if somebody comes up to me after a concert and starts complimenting me, it's the most uncomfortable I ever get. Okay. I immediately divert attention to something else. I really am not good at it. I really don't like it. But so he brought out an old K blonde plywood bass upright, and he put it in my hands. He said, "Here's how you hold it." And I plucked one note and felt that vibration run through me, and I said, "Sold, done." And he gave me some rudimentary lessons, and I still have a recording we did like 4 months later with the junior high school dance band. It has stuff like Autumn Leaves on it and stuff. And it's really sweet and charming. But
and you took to it right away.
I took right to it, and
were you teaching yourself faster than you were learning?
Well, I got as far as I could, and then started with teachers at that point, and finally ended up with a bassist named Nat Gangursky, who was one of the principal bassists in the LA music scene at that time, and he was great. And he really didn't have that many young students at that point. He was dealing with a lot of guys that were on upper echelon professionals. But I just fell in love with it. And the hardest part was I was joining bands, jazz groups and stuff at that point. It was being heard. It was really hard, especially with rock and roll bands at that time, surf bands and all that, because the guys had amps and I'm sitting up there just bleeding away, you know, just trying. And then my father took me... the Musicians Union has relocated from Vine Street now. They've got new offices. And across the street was a place called Stein on Vine. And it was a music store. Well, when it originally started, it was in the basement of the Musicians Union. So my dad took me there and bought me an electric bass and an amplifier. And this was probably around 63. And I think it was a Melody bass and a St. George amp. And suddenly I was a contender in the bands I was in because I could
And were
compete
you
with the
a
guys.
Beatles fan when that
The
happened?
Beatles changed everything.
Okay.
Up to that, I was not like...
You weren't pop music. Were you pop music?
I was more jazz.
Okay.
I really liked jazz and classical.
What pulled you to jazz? I'm always curious about this because jazz eludes me for the most part, especially progressive jazz.
Well, because the guys I was meeting were all in love with jazz. And my real joy was jazz, but more than that was R&B. I was a massive, like, you know, James Brown and all the period of that, Joe Tex, and you kind of name it. And those
were
people.
You in band? Were you in?
I was probably in like 3-4 bands at a time, all the time.
Okay. And were you keeping up? How were you in school?
I was a good student. I was probably a lazy student in terms of I could kind of get through okay without working really, really hard. The things that interested me, I worked very hard at, but a lot of stuff didn't interest me, and I just tried to figure out how little can I do and still get through it.
When did you know this is what I'm going to do for the rest of my life?
I never knew until I was.
Was there something else you wanted to do? when you were little?
Well, I always loved music, you know, and I figured it would be a part of my life always. When I started college in 1965, I went to Cal State Northridge, or San Fernando Valley State College.
That's where I wanted to go.
Yeah.
That was my dream, yeah.
Wow. Well, I did my first 2 years in the music department. Hated it. Because it seemed like all they wanted to do was turn out teachers and not... All I wanted to do was perform and be a part of it. So I went up to the administration building and took a battery of aptitude tests. Huh. One of the things I was always really good at was fine arts. But my real passion was science, so I became a science art co-majors, and I figured I might become like a medical or a technical illustrator at that point. And I was in my 5th year of college. I kept changing majors and then not taking prescribed curriculum. So
and you're playing
and
now.
I'm playing in clubs and all this stuff. During that kind of late 60s, like 67 to 69, I hooked up with a guy named Harmonica George Smith, who was probably the greatest blues harp player to ever come out of Chicago.
Wow.
And so I started doing the Chitlin circuit, and I got to work with Jimmy Reed and Lightnin' Hopkins and Big Mama Thornton and Magic Sam and Pee Wee Creighton and all these people through George. And out of that, I joined another band called Little John Farm, which had 2 of the Dragon brothers, you know, Dennis and Doug Dragon, and Daryl Dragon was the captain of Captain and Tennille, and their father, Carmen Dragon, was the conductor of the Glendale Symphony Orchestra. I mean, all these things get real convoluted, but out of that I joined a band called Wolfgang, and we were called Wolfgang because we were managed by Bill Graham, and Bill Graham's real name was Wolfgang.
I never knew that.
Yeah, so we named the band after him to suck up to him, and we do all that. But
so wait a minute, if he's your he was your manager?
Yeah.
So you're playing the Fillmore?
Well, the first gig we ever played as a band was at Winterland, opening for Zeppelin. That's the first time we were ever on stage in 1968.
Wow. And what was that? And so what was that like?
And we smoked it. I mean, but nothing ever happened with the band. It just didn't. It wasn't in the cards.
Anybody else in the band that has gone on to have a big career?
Not big careers, but everybody's still at the guys who are still alive. Bugs Pemberton was the drummer, and he was English, and he was came over. He had been in Jackie Lomax and the Undertakers, which were rivals to the Beatles in that period. And Jackie Lomax was like could have been a movie star. He was like one of those beautiful guys that you just see him and you go, oh wow, and he was great. But so this is where it gets kind of convoluted. I'm still in college. One of Bugs's friends was a guy named John Fishback. Now, John Fishback owned Crystal Recording Studios, and he engineered and produced like Songs in the Key of Life and all the early Stevie Wonder stuff. And he would come out and hang out at our rehearsals, we had a house out in Sunland out here. And at one of the rehearsals, he came with a friend of his, and it was James Taylor, who had just gotten back from England and had done his first album in England. And he hung out a couple of days.
Was the album out?
I think it had just come out.
But he wasn't like
nobody
James
knew
Taylor
nobody knew who James was at this point. And so he hung out, and we thought he was great. We loved a couple of songs that we did, but we were like a heavy rock band, so we like did a heavy rock version of Country Road and stuff. Well, James, after that, things started happening. He got offered a gig to play the Troubadour, and he remembered me from the rehearsal. And I'm still in college studying my art and my science and all that. And he was being managed by Peter Asher of Peter and Gordon. So Peter tracked me down kindly. He said, James thought you were great and would love for you to do this gig at the Troubadour with him. It was going to be one gig. And
had you ever played the Troubadour? Had you played the Troubadour?
No, I'd been there a couple of times. I mean, I'd played the Experience more than anything, which was my favorite club in Hollywood. But so I got hired to do one gig, and basically I'm still on the gig.
Wow.
I mean, my life just completely flipped over because like almost immediately after that, James was on the cover of Time magazine. It was the whole new kind of
folk rock
aura of music, singer-songwriter movement, and we just happened to be, it was the perfect storm. And had it not been James that I hooked up with, or had he not known John, who knew Bugs and come to our rehearsal and all that, I might just be somewhere penning pictures of intestines.
I have a feeling that would not have happened.
Well, I don't know, but to me, this is, I always tell everybody, like when I'm thinking about how I work, I say everything I do is etched in mud. You know, it's like I'm not. To me, everything's fluid, and so like I was.
Do you believe in fate? Do you believe in destiny, fate? Do you believe in that?
Not
so
really,
much.
not so much. I
You
think
make self-will.
Well, I think you just get up every day, and whatever happens, happens.
Okay.
And you know, there's times in life where you come to all these crossroads, and you've got to take something. And sometimes I've taken some, and they've gone down.
Okay, I was going to ask you: have you made any choices that you regret? I bet there haven't been a lot.
There haven't been a lot, but there's going to be a few in your life, and I think it would almost be impossible to go through life and not have regrets. You just would try to like have the scales of justice be more in favor of not screwing.
And I think it could go both ways. Like things that you did that you wish you hadn't done, and things that you didn't do that you wish you'd done. Like, is there something that you passed on that you regretted passing on?
Not so much, but there's times where I wish something that I had committed to had more success. Because there's times where I find myself thinking, I wish I'd been in a hit band. Excuse me, because, you know, I sit there and I look at it, I was just thinking the picture of Flea went by, you know, or I think of Bill Wyman or any of these people, I go, all they've really had to do is be in one group, and they've made incredible amount of money in success, and they've only had to learn their songs, and that's it, and then they're done. And I go, and I had somebody do an evaluation at one point.
How many people that you've played with?
Yeah, well, yeah, and they said that they think I've probably recorded somewhere between 25 and 26,000 songs during the course of my career. And you just go, so every time I get a gig with somebody in the studio or whatever, I've just joined a new band, and I have to learn all this material and work it up. And, you know, there's just times where I go, it's the greatest life, because I've gotten to work with so many people and so many great musicians and so many great artists that I would never denigrate that. But there's times where you go, God, it would just be nice to be able to chill. And just like you find out, like, you know, Chili Peppers are hitting the road, and we're going to go out and do a big arena tour and make tons of money. We're going to be out on the road for like 4 or 5 months. And then you've got the rest of the year to kind of do whatever projects you feel like doing, or nothing, or go fishing, whatever you want to do. And for me, I'm like kind of hustling all year long because I'm not on that level of that kind of stuff. But I also appreciate the fact that I get to work with all these different people. So it's a double-edged sword as far as
But you spent a lot of time with James. You've spent a lot of time with Phil.
Yeah.
Where you have, when you're doing those gigs, do you have the feeling that you're in a band?
Oh, absolutely.
Right.
But there's a finite period for each
Right.
of those things, and also your everything's predicated on their whims.
Right.
And you're not in a position to
Right.
really make decisions or something.
Right.
And
so I'm jumping way ahead, and we're going to go back. But
please.
so the immediate family is kind of.
Yeah, it's a unique experience. We've put this Danny Korchmar, Cooch, who was there with me.
Played my book launch with Steve Postel.
Great. When we originally worked with James Taylor on that first gig, it was Danny Korchmar on guitar, Russ Kunkel on drums, myself, and Carole King playing piano.
And how weird that you guys are back together now.
Well, that's the whole thing. Cooch got a record deal with a Japanese label a couple of years ago.
That was Carole King.
Oh, yeah, amazing. And so Cooch got this record deal, and he decided that why not just call the Cats and see us around. So he called me, he called Russ Kunkel, he called Waddy Wachtel, and Jim Cox to play keyboards, and Steve Postel, because Cooch moved back out here from back east, and he and Steve Postel, I'm not sure exactly how the two of them hooked up.
It hasn't been that many years.
No, it's only been a few years. I had done one of Postel's albums. I've known Postel longer than Cooch has. So we went in, Jackson Brown let us use his studio down in Santa Monica, and Nico Bolas engineered it, and we went in the studio, and we just had a ball. And Cooch ended up calling the album for the Japanese the Immediate Family. And then we went to Japan and gigged over there, and we've got some gigs over here. And suddenly it just felt right. And like he would introduce the band, he'd say, "We're a cover band that only plays originals," you know, which is really great. But it's true, because like Cooch co-wrote songs like New York Minute, Dirty Laundry, All She Wants to Do Is Dance. Waddy was involved with Zevon, so they were doing Werewolves of London and Johnny Strikes Up the Band. And so we started putting all these songs together that we had all been either writers, producers, or the musicians on it, or had toured with these people. And it sort of has taken on a life of its own. And now we just are finishing up an album of all originals. We've got an American label now and a Japanese label.
How fabulous.
And I don't know how many people out there saw the movie The Wrecking Crew about the great heroic musicians of
We're going to
late...
talk about that too, because I heard your experience with The Wrecking Crew for you. We're going to talk about that. But
Denny Tedesco, who is the son of Tommy Tedesco, who's probably the greatest studio guitar player who ever lived, did the Wrecking Crew movie, and then we've been approached, and they're now doing a movie about the immediate family.
According to Denny, they're way farther into it than you guys think they are.
No, they've gone, and they're keeping us in the dark. Like, they've done all these interviews, and I was there with Phil Collins in San Francisco when they interviewed him, and I contacted Billy Bob Thornton, and Billy wanted to be interviewed because I did one of his albums. He's a really good drummer and stuff.
Is he?
Yeah, he was. He used to, back when he was in Arkansas, he used to open for Black Oak, Arkansas and stuff. I mean, he's a real muso, and he's got his own band, and they're on the road.
And it's
all
not
the
a
time.
vanity thing. He's got
he's
chops.
Good. He's got chops, and he's really great. He's a dear friend. So, but they interviewed James and Jackson and Carol and Linda Ronstadt and all these. So we have no idea what's been done.
That's fabulous.
But we played the Iridium in New York, and they came and filmed at that show, and we did a bunch of stuff walking around the streets in New York, and then they've got archivists, digging up all kinds of footage and stuff. So we'll see. But I think they're taking a presentation to Sundance in next week or this week or something.
I was talking to Denny about it now. He'll be here.
Okay, great.
And we're going to talk. I said, well, should we wait until the film comes out? He goes, no, he wants to talk about it now.
Yeah, no, it's everybody's juices are flowing. So, but to get back to where we were at, so the James thing just started.
Now, when you met James, you were never a druggie, an alkie. That was never your thing.
Being a bass player, I'm a control freak.
Okay.
Yeah, and I saw the dark side of it all really young.
No addiction in your family, obviously.
No, not that. I mean, like, I think my sister probably did more stuff than I would have ever done. I mean, if she did one thing, she did more than I ever did.
You didn't even.
No, and it didn't appeal to me because I remember playing a gig. I was working with Albert Collins, and we were playing at Otis Art Institute back in the '60s. And I came up, and there was a park across the street, and I heard screaming in the park, and I went over there, and there was a guy on a really bad acid trip. And I sat on a bench with him for probably 8 hours, holding him and talking to him, and finally got him home when he came down enough to tell me where he lived and everything. And it was one of these things, I just went, this can't be right. I mean, just there's something really wrong. And I was around guys that died of meth overdoses, and then when I got involved with James...
Okay, so that's what I was just going to ask you about, because you were with James when he was at the height of his...
Yeah, he was doing everything, and then he got involved, and then he was doing methadone forever, trying to kick heroin.
But you were with him when he was doing heroin, weren't you?
Yeah.
So did that impact the art?
The thing that was amazing about James was he could barely get on stage. The first tours we did, we all had to sit in chairs because he couldn't really stand.
Wow.
Never missed a chord, never missed a note, never forgot a word.
Wow. I
mean, there was a window that just went this way, and the creativity and the juices flowed, and then after the gig was over, boom, it was back again, and there was this guy who was kind of had issues. But he's so brilliant as an artist that... it always just worried me that I would lose him because I've lost so many people for these kind of situations in this business, and it scares you with your friends. I mean, you never know. Like we were just talking about when we got here about this friend Lloyd Schwartz, who was one of the main guys at Tech 21 out of New York, and he's the last guy I was hanging with at NAMM just last week, and died while they were packing up. Had a massive heart attack and just dropped. Never in a million years
and
did
he look. Absolutely,
he looked totally fine. We were hanging out talking, and so you just don't know. And so when you start adding to that drugs and alcohol and all that, you really worry about these people and if they're going to be around. And they're people that are, to me, so valuable, not only to me as friends, but valuable to society as the kind of positive motivating factors for the arts and the soul of the country. So I was glad when James cleaned up.
Have you played with anybody that it did get in the way of the music?
Yeah, I mean, there are people that they thought they were great.
Yeah.
Have a couple of drinks, and all of a sudden, you would just go, "Oh God, really?" And things would start going left. But it happens, and some of those guys have cleaned up, and they're doing good. And some of those people died. I mean, a lot have died.
So as a session player, I'm all over the place.
Yeah, no, this is fine because I go all over the place
good.
too.
So as a session player, sometimes you're playing with people that you don't necessarily love the music that you're playing. I'm guessing.
Yeah.
So how do you get through? How do you get through that? What gets you through that?
I always look at it as when the phone rings, you have two choices. You can say yes or no. If you say yes, you bring your A game, no matter what it is. I want to be proud of what I've done that day. And now I may be sitting here going, nobody's ever going to hear this. This is just horrible. But
have you ever said no?
No, I've said no when they called me for the second time.
I see.
But you don't know what you're going to walk into,
right.
so I always generally said yes. And
so the one example that you gave that you didn't know what you were walking into, Bernie Williams, for example, right?
Yeah.
Shocked.
Yeah, I mean, totally surprised. I mean, here's this guy who's the center fielder for the New York Yankees. He's got a bunch of World Series rings. He's one of the best players in baseball, and I get a call to say he's going to do kind of a Latin fusion jazz album on guitar. And you kind of go, okay, whatever. And we walk in the studio. We went back to New York to cut it, and he comes in the studio, pulls his guitar out, starts playing, and completely all our jaws hit the floor and said, no, this guy's the real deal. I mean, it's like playing with Al Di Meola or one of these guys.
And has that happened?
Well, he was a music student when he lived in Puerto Rico. There's two brothers. It's Bernie and his brother. I forget his brother's name now. It's Hiram, I think, maybe, who was a violinist or a cellist. And but he said all through school he was a music major, and when he but he loved playing baseball, and apparently some scouts saw him playing baseball when he was a kid, and they recruited him, and that's how he ended up doing that. But they said he always had a guitar, like in the dugout during the games and stuff. He'd just be sitting there playing. That was his thing that he did. So when we recorded the album while he was still with the Yankees, but then within a couple of years he peaked out and retired. But you just never know what's going to happen.
Did you just play with him at NAMM?
No, I saw a picture of him at NAMM. I wrote to him. I said, "Man, I'm sorry I missed you, but NAMM is such an arduous experience. I'm good for. I mean, I was there for the full run of it, but it's a kind of thing like I try to walk an aisle and it can take like 2 hours. My whole NAMM experience is
it's more like this.
Well, it's a lot of this.
So let's talk about that. Okay. How did that start?
Okay, so for some reason people have come to equate me with giving the finger. I hardly ever gave the finger unless I was driving on the freeway and some schmuck did something that really pissed me off.
Okay.
But when I was out on Phil Collins's tour in 2004, they had a bass tech for me named Steve Winstead. Chinner was his nickname, and he said to me when the tour started, he said, "What do you need? What do you need?" He was so excited to, and I said, "I don't know. I've always teched myself. I mean, I've always done my own gear and stuff. I don't know what to tell you to do. I guess just see that the amp's on stage and." Stuff arrived. So he ended up becoming kind of like a general gopher for the tour, getting lozenges for the singers and all this stuff. And here's this guy who's super qualified to be like a monstrous bass tech without a gig, basically, because I really had nothing to do. I just dug the guy and everything, and we hung out on the road. So at the end of the tour, there was talk about Phil was pretty serious about retiring at that point.
When was this?
2004 or 5, right in there.
He did.
He did for 10 years. For 10 years, he called it quits. I think at that point he was just weary, after all the years of him, Genesis, all the Brand X, all the things he'd done. I think at that point he just wanted to go home. He had 2 young sons at that point, and he wasn't there for his older kids that much, so he wanted to be a stay-at-home dad. So at the end of the tour, I thought, I'm just take pictures of everybody and make myself a little photo album. And the first guy I go up to is Chinner, and he's sitting at his laptop working. And I said, "Hey man, give me a smile." And he's sitting there and he goes, and I took a picture and I looked at the picture and I went, "That's pretty cool." So I went around and got everybody on the tour to flip me off. Phil, his manager, all the band, the crew, everybody. Had like 100.
One little innocent moment.
Yeah, just one innocent moment turned into like 120 photographs. And then I just tucked it into a folder in my laptop, and that was it. Then a few years later, they called me and asked me if I would go on the road with Toto, because Mike Porcaro was too ill at that point to go back out, and they had like another year of touring to do. So I said, no, absolutely. I mean, it was tough because the tour was starting in 5 days, and I had to learn the whole show. And they were the second week of it. They were going to be filming. They're falling in between videos. So, I mean, I was stressed out, but I love the guys. I've known Luke since he was 19 years old and stuff. So it was really family. And during the course of that, I kind of went, well, I'll get all these guys to flip me off. And I ended up, by the time everything ended, with that tour, I probably had like 300 pictures, and I've known as a collector, because for most of my life was a voracious kitsch collector, and so one or two of something is one thing, but when you've got 50 of that thing, it turns into another thing. It takes on an energy of its own, and so I kept looking at these pictures, going, let's see what happens with this. Well, now I've probably got 11,500 pictures of people giving me the finger. Everywhere I go, I mean, people come up and flip me off, and I go, "It's because you're number one."
And it's pictures of them flipping you off.
Yeah, they're them flipping me off.
Okay,
I want pictures of people giving me the finger.
So Lee and I were talking before the show about him compiling these into a coffee table book. So for those of you out there, we have a lot of writers, publishers who watch the show. So if you have experience with putting together a coffee table book, come talk to Lee, because because
I'm really serious about this, and it is pretty fabulous. I mean, one of my favorite pictures is I did Grammys a few years ago with Merle Haggard, Christopherson, and Willie Nelson. I got the 3 of them flipping me off together. It's really just a great job. I've got there's a lot of celebrities in it. Jack Nicholson, Gwyneth Paltrow, and a lot of musicians, from Barry Manilow to Phil Collins to James Taylor. But it's also just the people on the streets.
So tell them what you told me about what your favorite part of those pictures is.
Well, the thing to me that really, there's X amount of ways to do this. I mean, the face is infinite. And the looks people give you when they're flipping you off, everything from like, to... it's the whole gamut of humanity.
Do you have any old ladies giving you the finger?
The oldest I have is 102.
Oh my God.
I have a nun in there. The youngest I have, and I wouldn't use it in the book because I didn't take the picture, but the youngest in the book is this friend of mine, Chris Caswell's granddaughter's ultrasound. And there's an ultrasound, and there's this little hand doing that. I've got lots of babies and stuff.
Ultrasound is not what I expected.
Yeah, it's pretty fabulous. But all kinds of stuff in families. I've got parents and their kids. I got the whole Nokia Theater in one shot during a Mark and Brian Christmas show.
Yeah, that's pretty fabulous.
I mean, all kinds of stuff. And to me, it's so engaging when you really start looking at all these pictures. And like when I was doing an album with Barry Manilow, and I said, "Come on, Barry, flip me off," and he kind of goes like this, and I go, no, really, let's go. And he puts on these wraparound sunglasses and goes, I mean, looks like a child molester. I mean, it's so creepy. Art Garfunkel is like so weird in this picture that he did. I mean, he got into this head.
So you do that. So if you go
the thing is, I take the picture like that because I don't want people to have too much time to think about it.
Right.
And kind of plant themselves.
Pose and,
kind of get them initially when they're doing it, because that's usually when you catch the real thing going on. But some people jump in. There was a great one. We were playing with, I think it was, might have been, I can't remember if it's the James Taylor Carole King reunion tour or Phil. I think it was James and Carole, but we played Madison Square Garden. And there was a security guy working Madison Square Garden. And I said, you got to flip me off, because his arm ceased to develop past his elbow, but there was a nub of a finger.
And it was just...
and so he just went like this, and there was this little finger coming out of the end of his arm. So I went, no, this is great. I've you know, really arthritic hands are great. There was a guy in New Zealand who kept going like this to me. And I kept going, no, I want this, and kept going like this. And then I finally realized this finger was missing, and it was those two fingers he was putting. He had lost this finger. So, I mean, it's just these weird little moments, but there's so many backstories to so many of the pictures that really
So you'll do that.
What I would probably do is have some pages that are packed with pictures, and other pages that have maybe a couple of pictures with stories about them that are really intriguing stories. And but I'd really like to get this up, because I've had people for years now saying, when are you going to get that book out there? So I know there's an audience for it.
Oh, yeah.
You know, people have really been curious about it, and I really think it's an important legacy to leave. I mean, I'm kind of looking at everything now, because I'll be turning 73. And I kind of go, you know, there's a finite amount of time left. That's why, like, I just did these panels at NAMM, and I love doing things like this, because I think at a certain point it's really important to share what you've done, not from an egocentric standpoint, but just for the history of what we all do.
And do you, I mean, you're still so vibrant, so young, you don't see an end to this, do you?
No, the end will be when I just keel over one day, and that'll be it. Or it's like Charlton Heston would say, they'll have to pry my bass out of my cold dead fingers.
Okay, so speaking of Charlton Heston.
So
how did this happen, and when did this happen? Because it's your thing, you can never undo this now. How did that happen?
I think a lot of it was when I was in high school. It was a really repressive time in this country. I mean, they had grooming guards and stuff, so like, you couldn't have facial hair. They would make sure your hair didn't go over your ears.
You weren't allowed to wear jeans. Like, I came just at the point where we were allowed to wear jeans to school.
Yeah, it was. They were pretty, like with girls. They would say you can't wear patent leather shoes because boys could see under your dress and your shoes. I mean, just this BS crap.
Right.
But you know, I was fortunate that coming from strong Eastern European Russian stock, that I started shaving when I was like 12.
Oh, wow.
You know, I mean, I could pull off a beard.
Were you a long hair in the 60s?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. But for the most part, I had like big mutton chops and a handlebar mustache. I'd wax it every day and do all that crap. But the thing that was great was when I was younger, every summer I would grow a beard so I could go play clubs. And I would be like 15, you know, and stuff, but I could get in and play the Lighthouse and different jazz clubs and stuff around.
Was it ever an issue that you couldn't play because you were too young to be in the club? Did they ever
Nobody
stop you?
ever questioned it.
Okay.
Now, the only time I ever got questioned about this, to go back into the Wayback Machine, there was
Wayback Machine.
Yeah. One of the oldest relationships I have in the music business is with a guy named Dan Dugmore. Dan played steel and guitar with Ronstadt, with James Taylor. I mean, he's now like kind of one of the kings of steel and all that down in Nashville. Dan is an amazing musician. Well, we were in a band called the Brimstones in '66 together, and we got a gig playing the senior prom for Canoga Park High School. And at that point, I'd been out of high school a year, so I hadn't shaved or cut my hair or anything. We show up for the gig, and the principal comes in and says, "No way that guy's going to be on our stage." I mean, they were just really offended by having this hippie in there. And I thought, well, I don't want to screw this up. This is a good gig for the band and everything, and these kids are expecting a fun evening. So my amp was on stage and the band was on stage, and then my cord ran back behind the curtain, and I played the whole show standing behind the curtain.
Oh, stop!
So nobody ever saw me at it, so I didn't have to taint the purity of this. So those kind of moments always kind of stick with you.
Okay, so that just reminded me of, you have a certain thing on your bass to throw people out. I'm trying to remember what it's called, what you call it.
The producer switch.
Your producer switch. Tell us about your producer switch.
That emanated from a session with Tommy Tedesco.
Okay.
We were doing, I think the session was, because I used to do tons and tons of TV shows. Worked on the music for those. How
did that start for you?
I was in a band called Group Therapy in 1967. Our producer was Mike Post. And Mike Post at that time was the musical director for the Andy Williams show, and he had just produced Classical Gas with Mason Williams. Now, when he started doing TV with Pete Carpenter, I had, at that point, started getting a reputation in the studio. So he tracked me back down and asked if I did it, and I started with him with the Rockford Files was the first show we did together, and then I did basically every TV show he did, after that Magnum P.I. and the A-Team and Hill Street Blues and all those shows. But
how did the session work start for you?
Because of James. Now, one thing I will say is one of the most... I love Peter Asher. I mean, I've known Peter a long time, and he's a very dear friend. One of the things he did when we did James's One Man Dog was the first album I did with James at that point. Up to that point, hardly anybody's names was ever put on records as credits of the musicians. That's why the Wrecking Crew. That's why nobody knew who the Wrecking Crew guys were, because they would be listening to the Mamas and the Papas and the Association and Frank Sinatra and Tijuana Brass. Same guys on all those records. Same musicians.
Was a friend of mine.
Yeah. So people didn't know it though. So Peter put our names, Russ and me and Cooch and everybody, on James's record. And that was the beginning of that movement.
Wow.
So all of a sudden, when people like Jackson Browne and all these different singer-songwriters were starting to get signed, whoever was doing them would look at James's album and say, well, if those guys are good enough for him, let's call them. And basically, for myself, I really had to learn how to be a studio musician on the job. It's not one of those things that you're really prepared for. I mean... How so? Well, playing in a club, in a band... You get away with murder in there in terms of sound and noise. You get in a studio where everything's under a microscope. You really have to figure out how to craft a sound, consistency.
Did everyone you played with in the studio know how to read?
No. The ones who really went on to be real studio guys, yeah, you have to read. You have to read. And that was, for me, the blessing of having spent so many years as a pianist, classical pianist, so I could read bass clef, treble clef, tenor clef, all those things. I know a number of guys that got called to do those sessions, and suddenly they'd be handed this giant, 6 pages of fly shit that they just, they just shut down at that point. And fortunately, the producer or whoever was doing it recognized it, and we would make enough time, because there was time then. It wasn't like everybody now, everything's like, got to do it like this, In those days, you'd be in the studio for a week. If you were doing an album project, 2 weeks, a month, it would go on, so you would have time to accommodate situations. But for being a hardcore player, you really have to be able to read music. You have to be able to read chord sheets. You have to be able to, like a Nashville number chart, or nothing. And it's a challenge. It's a hard gig. And I'll tell you, one of my most interesting experiences was, there was a country artist I had done a number of records with. And so he had called me and he said, I'm getting ready to go in the studio. Are you available? Let's do it. And I said, yeah. And John Robinson was playing drums on it. And about 4 days or so before we went in the studio, he called me sheepishly and he said, look, the road band would really like to do this record. And I knew all the guys in the road band. They were a great band. And I thought, well, hell, why not? Go for it. And so they went in the studio, and I, they had cut us off so late that we were going to get paid something for the cancellation. So I figured I'll just work around the yard and do something. I wasn't going to worry about it. And a couple of days later, he called me and he said, are you still available? And so I said, yeah. So he said, can we get back in the studio? And he said, is it cool if the band hangs out? I said, sure. I'd love to see the guys and all that. So we get in the studio and we all have our, just saying hi and everything. And I look in the control room and they're all back there behind the window watching. And he comes out with his acoustic guitar and plays the first song off to us, and we're writing our little notes on, scribbling out notes, and get it in the first take. And we go back in, and the guys are all going, how did you think of that part? I said, that's the difference between what you do and what I do. I said, we make the record, then you guys go into rehearsal for a month or so, learn all the stuff, then you go on the road for 3 months with it. By the time the tour's over, it's probably better than what we did on the record, because we've had like an hour to come up with it, and you've had months to refine it.
Wow.
But I said, that's what we do, is come up with parts on these things. And it was like this epiphanal moment for everybody there. And they said, because they never saw that, because they knew the song so well, they almost felt they had written the parts.
I was going to say.
And so suddenly when they had a blank canvas, they just kind of sat there, didn't really know how to come up with the ideas for the songs. So it's interesting how the process works.
Those parts probably get attributed to that. I'm sure they do to them.
Well, certainly the people that come to the concert and see it. I mean, anybody who's like an album geek that sits there and reads credits on the things would know that they weren't the guys that were on it.
Except those days are kind of over, aren't they?
Well, you start, it's kind of over, because it was bad enough when it was CDs. I mean, you'd get a thing this big with tons of red writing on a brown background, and you'd need it's just like, it's impossible to read this crap. It's like microfilm or something like that. And then now with streaming, there's nobody knows who did anything. I mean, you have to dig so deep to get information. And plus, there's so few people actually making... I mean, we could get into this so deep about the loss of albums and what that's done to music and what the digital revolution did to music. But... there's so many projects now where people aren't even doing albums; they're just cutting songs and putting them out there. There's and the whole idea.
Are you guys pressing vinyl, by the way?
We'll talk to the label about it. When I'm touring with Judith Owen, we've got vinyl, and we're probably selling more vinyl than CDs.
Is that
Last year apparently was the first year where vinyl has outsold CDs. Wow. I mean, there's a beauty. I mean, to me, the idea of playing a record, it's like a Japanese tea ceremony. I mean, you take this record out and you clean it and you put it on the turntable, and you might have a super high-tech one with all these beautiful balancing arms and stuff, and you might have one where you've got a penny on the tone arm, just to weigh it down. But then you have to roll a joint with the cover. But you could sit and read things, and a lot of albums had great inserts in them and stuff. I mean, our first Section album had this fabulous poster that was done by Rick Griffin. That's just incredible, who did Murphy the Surfer. He was like one of the main guys out of the San Francisco poster movement. And he did this cartoon.
I wanted to talk about the section, but it's before the section where you guys didn't get to play your own music, where the Wrecking Crew was you.
Yeah, that was when I was in the band Group Therapy that Mike Post was producing.
So now, why did you guys?
We were inexperienced. We had never been in the studio before.
Okay.
So
how old are you?
Probably at that point 19.
Okay.
Maybe. And we went into United Studio A. And, this is, wow. Sit down on the couch looking through the window, and I look, and there's Hal Blaine, there's Mike Rubini, Mike Melvoin, and Larry Knechtel on keyboards. Jim Gordon's the new young percussionist in town.
Who's you? Is Carol K you?
Carol would have been me, and Bobby West was playing upright. Dennis Budimir and I forget who, Al Casey, I think, were the guitarists on it, because Al... years later was being interviewed, and he said, I can't even believe I once worked on a record that Lee Sklar was in the band and they wouldn't let him play. But I really wasn't qualified, never been in a studio before, so we're watching all this, and I'm thinking to myself, and this is 67, and I'm thinking, not in a million years could I do this. I'm watching the process, and 3 years later I was working with those guys every day. So it's just weird. And I worked with Hal for many years. I probably did 100 albums with Hal, and I loved Hal dearly. But... So we'll go back to the producer switch now.
Sorry, I have
I love this train of thought, and let's just have an adventure. So we're doing this TV show or whatever we were doing, and I'm sitting to Tommy's right, and all they can see, we got baffles set up, ISO baffles, and the guy who's conducting is across the room, and it's probably about 40-piece orchestra in the room. So all you can see is we look like Kilroy. There's just like this much of our face showing, and he goes, Tommy, on this one, could I hear some mandolin? So Tommy goes like this and bends over and picks up a mandolin, starts playing. He goes, no, that's not it. Goes through like a half a dozen instruments until he finally hears what he wants to hear. And Tommy keeps accommodating. Well, I'm sitting here crying because Tommy only had his acoustic guitar behind the baffle, so he just kept bending over like he was picking something else up until the guy, but played in different positions until the guy finally, because he was that good a musician. And I looked over him.
Did it sound like a mandolin when he was playing?
Yeah. I mean, Tommy was a genius. But I looked over at him and I said, I just learned more in 5 minutes how this business works than I did all through junior high, high school, college, all that. I said, and I went home and immediately drilled a hole in my bass, bought a Switchcraft switch, and put it in. There's no wires or anything going to it. It just was a switch. And when people would say, can you make that bass part, maybe give me a little more shimmer, I would make sure they saw me flip the switch, and then I would just move my hand position, and they'd go, cool, that's great. And it just saved me, because otherwise...
Did you ever get busted?
No.
You have never been busted.
Well,
now you will be.
Well, at this point, it's too well known.
That's right.
And I did a signature bass for Warwick Basses out of Germany, and we did a beautiful producer switch, because it's a semi-acoustic bass, and when you flip the switch, it's a whole group of LED lights that different colors, each one representing apparently a different sound. And if you don't like any of them, when you get to the last position, there's an inlaid red hand giving the finger. It's fantastic. Everybody who sees it goes berserk. And all it is a 9-volt battery going to these lights. It doesn't change anything. But you can change how you're playing to accommodate it. But so it's just funny, people always. And back in the day when Jim Roberts was the editor of Bass Player magazine, every April they would do joke ads in it. You know, people didn't know they were joke ads, but it was April Fool's.
Right.
And they did an ad for the Leland Sklar producer switch. He said, you have no idea how many people wrote in wanting to know how they could buy one, not knowing what it does. They just saw it was me and a producer switch, and they figured it must do something cool.
Very cool.
And I was thinking, we should have done it. 1995.
You could have had the pet rock.
Oh, absolutely. It would have been the pet rock. It would have been that. So
now talk about the Frankenstein bass. Like, what's that about?
It was one of these weird things. I ended up, one of my first basses of real professional basses, I got my hands on a 1962 Fender Jazz bass for $90. It was beautiful. It was a beautiful instrument that was like all perfect with all the felt mutes and the cover plates and all that. And I'm in college at this point, and one night I get all bored and I get out a hacksaw and some shit, and I carve it in to make it look more like a Les Paul body. And I carve peace signs and onks and all this crap on the hippie stuff, which kind of screwed up the weight of the body. So then I put a 2-pound block of lead in the end of the strap so it would be balanced. And I played that. That's the bass I used on all the early James Taylor, Jackson Browne. I used it on Spectrum with Billy Cobham. So, well, at one point, I got my hands on a 62 Precision neck. Now, I'm not a fan of precision basses. It's a little too tubby for me. But I thought, this is a really good piece of wood and everything. So I checked, and there was a company out east of here called Charvel. And Charvel was making replacement parts and all that. So I went out there, and there was a stack of blank alder precision bodies in the place. So I picked them all up, and the guy said, well, you want to take a listen? I said, sure. And I said, you have a piece of wire? And he said, well, yeah, you got a piece of wire. And I just hung each one from a piece of wire and just tapped them and one of them just went boom. It just had this resonance. I said, I'll take this one. I went, and at that time, this was around 73, the watering hole for most of the musicians in LA was Westwood Music, Fred Wallachy. It was just when you'd walk in there anytime and you'd see Jackson would be in there, Ry Cooder would be in there. I mean, they had everything from practically like Stradivarius violins to like the funkiest stuff. And Fred, his passion for music was just astounding. And so it was great. And the guy who ran their repair shop was John Carruthers. So I went in, and he had done repair work for me. And I said, look, I've got this body and I've got this neck. Let's make a bass out of it. Now, the thing was, so we made it an experimental bass. Since I like a jazz bass, I brought my jazz bass in, and we took a template off the neck. And he reshaped this precision neck to be a jazz neck. in doing that process, we had to pull the frets out of the bass to redo it all. And I'm walking around the shop while he's doing it, and I look and there's rings of fret wire hanging on the wall. And most basses have kind of medium to jumbo frets on them. And I saw this fret wire that was so thin and small. And I said, "What's that?" And he goes, "That's for mandolin." I said, "Let's use that." He said, "Well, no, it'll just wear out really fast." I said, "No, let's try it. If it doesn't work, I pay you for a refret, and we'll just do it." So we put that in. The body that I got from Charvel was a precision blank body. Now, the way pickups were laid out on those was if you got the neck here and the body here, they would be the pickup for the G and the D string would be here, and the A and the E string would be here. And I kind of thought, just by the nature of the timbre of those strings, if we're going to do this, why don't we reverse them so that the lower strings are closer to the bridge? It would be more clarity. But I said I also really like a jazz bass. So what we did was that little area where those two pickups were, we put two 9-volt batteries in that, and then put two sets of precision pickups where jazz pickups would have normally gone, rerouted it for those in this reverse position. Rick Turner had just started EMG pickups, and I got a pair of his first pickups for that, and I had a Badass 2 bridge. So I call it Frankenstein because it was all these pieces and stuff, and it could have been a piece of crap. And the minute we plugged it in, we just went, "Oh my God, this thing is unbelievable!"
You created a monster.
Created a monster, and I've used that on probably 90% of everything I've ever recorded.
Oh my God!
It is that bass, and it's sitting at home. I use it.
How many basses do you have?
I don't have that many. I'm not a collector. In fact, I'm unloading a mountain of gear right now. If anybody's interested, I had all my gear in a warehouse, and we just unloaded 3 truckloads of gear that is going to be going online. I took 10 basses. They took 10, but I've got basses in like all the hard rocks around the world. I've done a lot of dealing with them over the years. And I've donated a lot of basses to charities for their auctions. But right now I've probably got about 6. It's pretty much what does my job for me. To me, it's not really fair to have an instrument sit in a closet or in a warehouse. It really needs to be played.
So you don't collect basses, but you collect kitsch.
Yeah.
So what's the kitsch that turns you? Because we were talking about Allie Wilson.
Well, there's so much.
So she was into lunchboxes. She was into.
Yeah, I've got everything from a huge amount of Fiesta ware to German carved, like Bavarian hall trees with carved bears.
Are you a big eBay? She was a big eBay.
She really was eBay.
Yeah.
My wife does some eBay, but for me, not drinking and not doing drugs, I had a lot of time on the road to myself when everybody else was still unconscious. I would take empty road cases on the road, and as we would hit towns, I would go out and I would just hit all the junk shops and stuff, and I would load cases up and come home with tons of stuff. I was a voracious flea marketer. I mean, every weekend was flea markets. It would be the Rose Bowl, San Fernando, Long Beach, Santa Monica. So I was always out scrounging.
Did you ever find something that was such a fine, the
lots.
Like people, they're selling it for 50 cents, and it's something like so.
There was a company called Lashes back at the turn of the last century that in soda fountains they made these big bisque china things. They made syrup. So if you wanted to have an orangeade, this thing would look like a big orange with a pump on it, and the guy would pump that into it and then do seltzer, and you'd have this drink. They're really expensive, and I remember finding one, an orange at a swap meet, and it was like $200 or something. Oh, I gotta get that. That's such a steal. Where we were getting ready to play Tanglewood with James Taylor, and Tanglewood is right next to a little town called Lee, Massachusetts. So we were staying at a hotel there, and I walked down the street, and there was a secondhand shop, and there was a Lashes lemon, because it says Lashes on the outside, 25, it's marked. And I'm going, oh crap. So I go in trying to be cool. And I go, okay, can I get that lemon in the window? And the woman comes back and starts wrapping up, and I start to get my wallet. She goes, that'll be 25 cents, please. It was a quarter.
Oh,
and the thing's probably worth $1,200 at that, and that was 30
back
years
then,
ago.
Right.
There are lots of things like that, but the thing is, it's only really worth that if you go and resell And I've really hardly ever sold anything. I just unloaded some stuff with a guy who came to the house through a friend of mine who I'd bought stuff from. And this guy came, and he just wanted to see the collection. And the next thing you know, he sends me an email with a whole list of different things he'd seen with what he's willing to pay for it. Mm-hmm. And I said, sure. And they came over, and I sold him a bunch of stuff, and I'm getting ready to have him come back, and there's a bunch more things. And I've got a hot rod, and I might actually, he's now dealing with a major auto auction, and I might have them take the hot rod to that, because I just don't have time.
Okay, so let's talk about another passion of yours, art.
Yeah.
So you started out, you were drawing.
Yeah.
How did you get into sculpting? Like what?
Well, because when I got into college, you really had to take everything: ceramics, sculpture, wood shop, and all that. I remember wood shop really well, only because the teacher was giving us a safety demonstration on the table saw and cut his finger off giving the safety demonstration.
Come on, cut it off?
It went rolling off the table. There was blood squirting all over. And
God.
at the end of the hall, they had one of those Coke machines where the glass would fall, the ice would fall in. And we did that as soon as the ice was in it. We grabbed that, put his finger in the ice, went to the hospital, and they sewed it back on. But it was his little finger, and he had lost that joint. So the top of he had a little short little finger. But we were going, we would have understood what you meant. You didn't have to be this graphic, about the whole thing.
Wow.
But my sculpture teacher was a guy named Bob Bassler, who is still up at Valley State College. And he turned me on to welding, and I fell in love with welding. And to me, that's still my favorite art form I've ever done, more than music or anything, was working in steel.
What?
Yeah, I loved it. And a lot of it was because, now when you put that mask on, your entire world is that big. It's a light that big. Everything disappears. And I got to know all the teachers well enough up there where I got keys to the building. And I would sometimes go and stay up all night working and then go to classes in the morning, just lock up and leave. They trusted me to do that. And I just loved it. I just loved that creative process. And I loved the fact I was working in metal. And if something just pissed me off, I could throw it across the room and not break it like a piece of marble. And I might dent something. And I go, oh, that's cool. That helped.
Do you still do it?
No. I don't have any setup for it. I've still got gauges and stuff at home, but I really don't have. I thought by this age I would be out in the pasture and I would just be doing things to amuse myself. Yeah, welding and or doing illustrations or something. And it's just in a kind of flavor of the moment business, and that still is pretty much youth driven. It's remarkable how many older acts are the ones that are out working and that have the longevity. It's amazing when I sit there and I look at McCartney's working. When I was out with Toto, we were in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and we're checking into our hotel, and we hear on the window outside, and we turn around, there's Abe Jr. out there. And what the hell are you doing here? Abraham Laboreal Jr. is the drummer with Paul McCartney. And his father's one of the great bass players. And Abe Sr. is, I love Abe Sr.
We had James Gadsden on a
couple
weeks ago, and James and Abe together are crazy.
Yeah. Oh, it's unbelievable. So he came in, he said, what are you guys up to? He said, well, we're playing down the street tomorrow night. He goes, well, we're playing there tonight with Paul. Why don't you come to the show? So we go back and we go over early, and we're sitting in the dressing room with Paul. Talking and
we're sitting in the dressing room with
Paul.
Yeah,
I mean, it's that kind of. But for me, the fun part of it was because I had met Paul. To digress for a moment, we played with Phil. We did a thing at Nebworth outside of London in 1990. It's a giant fundraising thing, and it was one of those evenings. It's McCartney, it's Elton, it's Clapton, it's Genesis, it's Pink Floyd, Phil, Zeppelin. Everybody is at this thing. And we put a thing together with Phil and Genesis, with the three guys, and then Phil's band. It was great. But I walked back into the lunch area, and there's Paul sitting with Linda. And I'm just going, I've got to say something. I'm going to break some glass and just crawl through it to get over to the table, because this guy, to me, was one of the biggest influences of my life. And I get over and he goes, oh, God, Lee Sklar, I always wanted to meet you. And I go, don't do this to me. Don't screw this up. So we start talking, and I said, funny, the last time I saw you, I was an usher at the Hollywood Bowl when the Beatles played there.
Were you really?
Yeah, at the 66 show.
Wow.
So it goes back to that. So we went back, and it was great to see him again, and we're sitting in the dressing room, and at that time, I think Paul was 70 or 72, a few years ago. And we start talking. He goes, yeah, it's always funny when people say, when are you going to retire? And he just goes, from what? I mean, this is kind of like, this is your DNA. This is what you are meant to do. And he said, I don't know what else I would do. I mean, we all have interests. I love gardening. I love tinkering around with things. But when everything's said and done, the thing that I'm going to look at is the music.
Okay, so let's talk about touring for a bit now. At this stage of life, is it still fun?
I love it. Absolutely. I think if I was put in a situation where somebody said you can either do studio work or tour, I would pick touring over
But
recording.
you tour well.
Well, but I also don't tour well.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, when we go out on the road, like with Judith Owen, or when the immediate family's going out, we're looking for kind of inexpensive. We're traveling commercial and coach and stuff. I mean, to me, I see nothing. I always look at like those really insane tours like Phil, where we've got a private plane and all that kind of stuff. I kind of look at it as it's just a moment in my life. This isn't how I live, and this isn't what my expectation should be of what I do. My expectation is to be a working musician. And so, I'll take whatever comes along. One of my favorite bands I ever was involved with was a group called Barefoot Servants. This was in 1993. I was up in above San. There was a studio called The Site, which was across from Skywalker Ranch, north of San Francisco. And I was doing. It was either a Linda Ronstadt record or Jimmy Webb. I can't remember which one we were in. It might have been Linda. But Michael Frondelli, who was one of the guys that ran Capitol, he contacted me. He said, look, I got this band, and we're going to go in the studio, but there's no bass player in it. So can I send you some stuff to listen to and see what you think? I listened to like 5 notes and called him back, said, count me in. Wow. It was John Butcher from John Butcher's Axis, who still is like the king of Boston music scene. I mean, it's like being with Hendrix. I mean, this guy's like so ridiculous. Wow. It's 2 guitars. It was 2 guitars and drums. And Ben Schultz was the other guitarist. And Ray Brinker, who works with Tierney Sutton, was the drummer on it. And so I came back and we went in for a few days to rehearse and learn the material so we could plow through this record, just cut it as live as possible at Capitol. And I love these guys. And I said, look, if you need somebody to go on the road with you, I'll do it. I'd love to do it. And I turned down a really big tour to go on the road for almost 2 months just for per diem. Because I believed in the music that much. And it's still, to me, people come up to me on the road and they go, Barefoot Servants, man, that's the shit. Are you ever gonna? And we'll never get back together again because it ran. We did 2 albums, and
I have to go find it now.
It's like Hendrix meets ZZ.
Oh my gosh.
With attitude. And John's one of the best rock singers I've ever worked with, and they were both badass guitar players.
Wow. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about some favorite moments in your life, because you've played every venue, every country, every place. What are some of the highlights of like the things that took your breath away?
I think one of the things that was great was when we started with James, like we said earlier, the original band was me and Cooch and Russ and Carole King. Well, during the course of that period, James really encouraged Carole to start doing some of her stuff in the show because nobody knew who she was. I mean, she had this enormous reputation as a songwriter, but didn't know who she was. So she started doing it and then ended up going in the studio and cutting Tapestry. So we're looking at the band going, okay, so one of the sidemen in the group has the biggest record in the world. That's not going to work out. So she ended up leaving, and I did an album at that point with Tom Jans and Mimi Farina. Mimi Farina was Joan Baez's younger sister. And so there was a keyboard player on the session named Craig Durkee. And I called Peter Asher, and I said, I think I found the guy to replace Carole. This guy's great. And so we're out on the road. Craig joined, and Peter Asher had a partner at that time named Nat Weiss. Nat was a major lawyer in New York, but he was also partners with Brian Epstein. He was really one of the people that helped get the Beatles to America. And he called us. He was out on the road with us, and James was not really into sound checks or anything. We would do line check, and then he'd split, and we would all just jam. We were having so much. We loved being together. And one night, Nat calls us to his room, and he says, "I want to play you guys something. You got to check this out." And he puts his tape on, and we're listening, going, "Fuck, that's great. Who's that?" He goes, "That was your sound check today." And he said, "You guys should really think about becoming a band." And so we sort of evolved out there on the road with James. And James said, "Look, you guys are the rhythm section. Just call it the section." We went fine because we were toying with all these ideas. Well, Nat was also handling Mahavishnu Orchestra. So we got linked up, and the section ended up opening for Mahavishnu Orchestra on the road. And through that, I got to know Billy Cobham. And so Billy contacted me when he got his record deal in '73. And I went back to New York, and in like 2 days, we cut Spectrum, which became kind of one of the quintessential albums of that period. And this is all. So when I went in the studio with him, that's still one of the most profound experiences I had in the studio, was doing that album with Billy and Jan Hammer. And Tommy Bolin was the guitarist on it. And I knew Tommy from Zephyr days, because when I was in Wolfgang, we were both managed by the same criminal. Because Bill Graham was in San Francisco, but he had another guy handling everything down in L.A.
I was going to say, Bill Graham was a criminal?
No, Bill was.
God, that'd be too depressing.
No, Bill, I love Bill dearly, and he was a fabulous guy. But this Bruce, I'm not going to say his last name.
Okay.
He was just one of these hucksters. But we went out and did gigs with Zephyr, so I got to know Tommy. So I walked into Electric Ladyland in New York to do Billy's. I'm like, Tommy, he was late. So that was great. But there's been like so many different.
How about like a concert that was just like you walked out and.
One of the greatest things I ever saw from a stage was we went. We played the first Rock in Rio festival with James Taylor. Then we went back and toured Brazil. When we played Sao Paulo, we were in this big soccer stadium. It was huge, 100,000 people or something at this thing. And we're up there, and we start playing Only a Dream in Rio. And the audience starts flicking their lighters on the beat. Well, because of the distance and the delay from the stage, all we saw was fire kept repeating. And we were almost stopped playing. We were so moved by this. One of my favorite things, no matter what the venue is playing In the Air Tonight with Phil Collins. Because the anticipation that song builds up to that drum fill.
It just gave me goosebumps.
It gives me goosebumps.
I mean, I can remember where I was when I heard it the first time.
It's deep. And
Risky
there's
business,
people,
right?
Yeah, people bringing drumsticks to the gig and air drums and all this. So when that thing happens, people stand up, and we just, like, every night, man, it's like your flesh crawling. It's like unbelievable. But for me, really the blessing has been the entirety of it all, because there's so many gigs that have been really unique and special.
Anything really small?
I love small venues. I really love them. I mean, when we were out over the past few years with Judith Owen, we were like, I remember we played a pub, just she and I, up in the north of England. There's like 50 people in this pub, and this guy came up to me and he goes, last time I saw you, he's like Wembley Stadium. I said, so what are you doing here? I said, playing music. Are you having a good time? He said, I am.
Wow.
And those intimate rooms where you can smell the people, you can taste the people, I mean, there's something about that as compared to playing for 80,000 people. I mean, to me, your relationship with those massive crowds is about the same as a big club, because all you really see is that first couple of rows, and the rest of it becomes like a patchwork quilt. I mean, everybody's out there, but it's, to me, it's that relationship of you and people and the immediacy. There used to be a club here in LA called Dante's. There's a jazz club on Lancashire, and the section played there a lot. And God, it was so much fun. Everybody in town would show up, and the energy in the room was pumping. That became like our staple, was to play Dante's.
That's why I want you to play the living room. And this sounds really weird, but because
I love house concerts.
But it's not even a house concert. It's different than a house concert. But it's because it's at 11 o'clock in the morning.
Oh, wow.
And Mickey Dolenz was like, I can't sing at 11 o'clock.
Yeah.
But he did, and everybody does. But anyway, because it's daytime,
Yeah.
and everybody eats first together, and when you break bread with people, it changes
Different.
the energy. The energy shifts.
That's
once
great.
you're eating with people, and so then it's very interactive because you can see everybody's eyeballs. It's daytime.
Yeah.
It's a house, and so it's very interactive. And it's a complete. Everybody who's ever played the living room, it becomes like a favorite.
Well, we have to do that.
Yeah, it's very intimate. It's and fun. The energy is crazy. I mean, Allie came here with Larry Dunn from Earth, Wind and Fire and had 7 pieces playing in there, and everybody. Evan Handler's standing on a chair shooting it. Crazy stuff happens, but it's that.
It'd be fun to come here and do it with Judith.
I would love that.
Yeah,
I would love that.
I'll work on
it. I knew
it.
Bambi. We were working on it back in the day. When she was with Bambi.
I'll deal with Judith.
I would
and
love
we'll
that.
sort
And the thing is, because it's the human connection.
Yeah.
Because that isn't that what music is?
Yeah, yeah.
Right.
That's what breaks my heart when you look at schools, and that's the first thing they're willing to cut from their budgets and stuff. Is let's get rid of the arts. No more theater, no more music. And
my kids went to a little tiny school in New York called Manhattan School for Children, and it was all parent founded, and all I did was raise money so that they could have drama and art and music, and then we came out here, and it doesn't exist in the daytime curriculum. In California.
It's really. I mean, when I was going to Birmingham, Sally Field was in the class. Cindy Williams was there. Bobby Sherman. All these people that came out of that, because a lot of the kids, we were the Valley side, but there was a lot of kids that also came from the Encino side. So there was all these. I used to go up with this one group and we would rehearse, and it was Dennis Weaver's family. We'd be up there, and he'd be, come in there. It was the height of Gunsmoke, and there's Chester. He's not limping.
That's crazy.
So it's just nuts. But it's such a valuable part of the society to have the arts.
Do you do things for music in the schools?
I support it as much as I can. And the funniest thing for me was when we played at Bogies up in Westlake Village with the immediate family, and this guy came up to me and he said, "I'm a teacher at Agoura High School. Would you consider coming and talking to one of my classes?" I said, "Sure, I'd be happy to." This is not a music class, a general ed class. So I go up there, and there's all these kids in there, and I'm kind of thinking, what the hell, have I got? And so I said, well, let's, any questions before we really get started? And this one kid, like 15 years old, kind of just, he raises his hand, and I say, yeah. He goes, "You played on Stratus?" Billy Cobbs. I'm going, I mean, it suddenly made me know something's going to go on here. I mean, the last thing I expected him to say was Stratus.
Of all the things you've done.
Of all the things I've done. But I think, if anybody asks me, I always say yes, if the schedule permits to do it. And it's really fun talking to young people. And that's why I love doing panels and things like that. My favorite part of it is when you get to the Q&A. I really love questions.
Okay, so speaking of getting to the Q&A, Pete, do we have any questions for Lee?
Oh, my thumb is killing me from all the questions.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Lots of questions. So here we go. We have the
I have to go now.
The best.
All right, let's see. Okay, L. Scott Knight, question for Lee. What's your best trick or advice for getting in the pocket with a drummer?
Listen. More than anything, it's really about listening, because I've had kind of the experience where, like, one day I could be working, it was in the past, but I would be working with Levon Helm, and then the next day I'd be working, with Simon Phillips. And you really have to be chameleon-like and really kind of dig where the pocket is with each one. You have to be, once again, etched in mud. You have to be malleable, because sometimes a guy will be sitting way back on the beat. Another time, a guy's leaning really forward on it. And you just listen. And it really, if you really kind of hone that skill, it doesn't take long to fall into the pocket. But I think everything about doing any kind of music is predicated on listening to each other. It's not about you. It's about the entirety.
That so much. So aside from Russ, can you name other drummers that's going home for you?
Oh, God, there's so many. Well, for me, I mean, some of the greatest losses of this business have been like Jeff Porcaro, Carlos Vega, Larry London. Losing those guys was devastating. But, when I get to work with guys like Jim Keltner.
God, I just saw him recently play with Mike Lang.
Oh, yeah.
And Mike Lang loves you to death.
Oh, Mike is one of the most gifted pianists.
He blew me out.
Yeah, Jim is a.
He's so creative.
Well, we just did this panel at NAMM. It was me and Lukather and Keltner were the panel, But like,
sorry, I missed that.
Oh yeah, but like Eddie Bayers in Nashville and Paul Lime. I mean, the amount of Phil Collins is still one of the best drummers I've ever worked with.
Does he still play drums?
No, he can't.
That's
Physically
what I thought.
can't. But on the tours, his 16-year-old son, when we started the tour, was playing drums. Who's 18 now,
Wow.
and Nicholas is a badass drummer.
Wow.
I mean, he got the gene. He dove into the deep end of the gene pool. And he's great.
Well, that's where Phil started. I mean, it wasn't he.
Oh no! If you were walking down the street and bumped into Phil, not knowing who he was, and you said, "Well, what do you do?" He would say, "I'm a drummer."
Really?
Yeah, more than anything else. His passion and love was drums, and that's the heartbreak. It's like Ronstadt not being able to sing. You know, it's that kind of thing. So it is what it is. But I mean, for me, the greatest blessing of this business has been the relationships with other musicians, and I've gotten to play with like the most insanely great drummers forever. Neil Wilkinson over in England, Carl Brazil. I mean, there's just tons of these guys, but each one of them has nuances. So you have to just kind of slide in there and not... And you throw out suggestions, you know, like if something's going on, you say, well, let's just sit back on that just a little bit here. I mean, you have dialogues. I mean, this is, you know,
so
it's like ballet.
It sounds like
it's a
you
dance.
lean in more than you exert your own will. It sounds like you're leaning in.
Well, I'm a team player more than anything. And primary importance is the song. More than anything, everything stems from the song, and it's you don't impose yourself on the song. You somehow figure out what that song wants from you.
You're serving it.
Yeah, and once you dial that in, then the players all find their places in it, and I get thrilled. I mean, when I did Barefoot Servants and I walked in, I had never heard of or met Ray Brinker. We played 8 bars together, and I wanted to have his child. You know, he's such a great drummer. You know, Abe Jr., I've known Abe since he was a little kid, and every time we work together, I just sit there and I go, man, I love this cat. You know, it's a fabulous community of people. If that answers anything.
Yes, that answers. I'm sorry, I hijacked the question.
No, it's
more. Tom Jacob asks, did you work with Mr. Waddle, music department at Birmingham?
No, I think that must have been... I graduated in 65, so chances are that might have been after, because it was Ted Lynn and Lillian Cushane and Milton Anderson. Now, Milton Anderson, who was our choir director, started the group Young Americans, and I was in the rhythm section of the original Young Americans. We did like the Gene Kelly TV show.
Oh my
and stuff.
God!
So I go back. I remember the day they invented dirt.
I always say I'm older than dirt, but inventing dirt is even better.
That was a tough one. No, but I don't remember that name. So it might have been after
the day they invented dirt.
So Deslin Ross, who watches every week, he's 18. He seems to know everything about everybody in rock.
Wait, I have to interrupt you for 1 second because this is too exciting. Rick Smokey, the guy I was telling you about who does my printing.
Oh yeah.
He just said, "Tell Lee I can do the book." He's a printer. He can do the book. He can do your book.
Tell him that I want to have his child.
Rick
I want to have your baby.
Rick Smokey of Quick Impressions of Chicago. I'm doing a shout out right now. He is the printer extraordinaire. He will do all your stuff. He's going to do Lee's book. Rick Smokey. He did my book. Well, no, he didn't do this book.
Then
he did all of this stuff, though. But he's going to do your book.
Made this popcorn.
He's going to do your book. I'm so glad that I was
Rick,
scrolling.
we will talk.
Okay.
We will talk.
You should have a bowl of popcorn with a middle finger coming up.
Absolutely.
Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry,
so
Pete.
Deslin, who's 18 in Ohio.
Hi, Deslin. Love Deslin.
He definitely would like to get some of your gear. Scott Knight, are you selling your groove tubes, Rick?
Sorry to say, I think that was sold a couple of years ago. But keep an eye on my Facebook page because they're just starting to catalog all this stuff now.
Oh, wow.
And then, I mean, it's not going to be... I'm not going to be one of those guys that's out there trying to, I'm going to retire on this. I just want to move all this stuff along, and everything I'm selling, I'm signing the gear and stuff, just so that so everything will have provenance to it. But tell them just to keep an eye on my Facebook page, and when we're ready.
Okay, so you have a few pages. So where do you do on which page?
Everything I do on Facebook. There's one page there that has a picture of me in my hot rod.
Is it a professional page or your personal page?
I don't. It's only personal page. I don't have a pro page.
You do.
I mean, there's stuff, but I don't have anything to do with those.
Okay.
People have put those
I
together.
believe in personal pages because then you can talk to people.
Oh yeah, and the one thing, always know that if anybody's talking to me, they're talking to me. Nobody administers my page.
I love that.
Only me.
I love that.
And
if people send you a message, you're going to read it?
Oh, absolutely. I read everything. And I respond to as many as I possibly can there until they tell me to go die.
Mike Finnegan was on here. Hi, Lee. You sound great. Met you at... No, that can't be
that's
Mike.
Got to be a different
Mike. Yeah, that's a Mike Finnegan.
Met you at the Iridium Show in an Immediate Family. You're gracious with your time. Oh, fuck you.
All right, Pete, I hijacked it again. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Desmond Ross asks, are you a fan of Carol Kay's bass playing?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Carol Kay's place in music history is so profound and so deep. There's only one. And the fact that she was able to do the career she did at a time when she was like the only girl in the room, other than the orchestral people. But when you look at that good old boys club, and there's Carol in the middle of it, just with bigger balls than any of them, it was. I totally love her. Totally love her.
Rick Smokey would like to know any comments on the making of Running on Empty tour and album.
It's probably one of the most honest live albums ever done. I think, so many times groups do a live album and the only thing left at the end of it is the audience because they go back in the studio and they're fixing all the vocals. Running on Empty was magic. First off, Greg Ladani, rest his soul, was one of the finest engineers. I mean, his tutelage under Val Garay was really deep, and Val was one of the finest engineers. But what you hear on that album is what happened out there. It was a deep tour. We had so much fun on that.
So that's one thing you could do. So Rick, he's the one who's going to make your book.
Yeah.
Jackson Brown is his.
I got lots of Jackson fingers.
So you hook him up, with some Jackson, and then that'll be a deal made in heaven.
Oh no, we'll talk about it. But that is really, and still I listen to it and it sounds so fresh. It's still really good. I remember I might have been Jackson's like 60th birthday or something like that, and the band got together and we were playing in Don Miller's backyard, his manager, and we decided to play Running on Empty. And we're playing it, and he just turned and he said, God, I forgot how good this is. And we looked at him and we said, we're not dead. We're still here. But it was fun. 2 years ago at the Tech Awards, they gave him the Les Paul Award, and they gave the section the Lifetime Achievement Award.
Aww.
So we played Running on Empty at the Tech Awards, which is really cool.
Is it out there? Is it on YouTube or something?
It's on. Everything's on YouTube.
Everything is
I mean,
on
the
YouTube. Beauty
for me is I'm an absolute insomniac. So I'm up sometimes 3-4 in the morning just going through YouTube, finding stuff, going, I didn't see anybody there with a camera. How the hell is this on here? I mean, who took this? It's just crazy how much stuff is been archived.
Especially that early stuff.
Yeah.
When you
amazing.
find that stuff, that must be incredible. Because now everybody's got a phone.
Yeah, everybody's got that, but that stuff was back.
Right.
That was analog. So, any other question?
Yeah, Deslin asks again, what are some of the tracks you played on that you are the most proud of?
That's where it gets really difficult because some of the stuff that I enjoyed the most never saw the light of day, or it's buried in projects and things like that. But certainly, songs like "Smiling Face" with James Taylor and Stratus with Billy Cobham. But I've enjoyed so many different, genres. Like I used to do like all Stephen Curtis Chapman's records, who was he was one of the main artists in the contemporary Christian community, and wrote all this really amazing music. Then all the different country people. One of my favorite things, and it's actually getting life again, which is really shocking, is Gene Clark's "No Other." Gene Clark was the original singer in the Byrds, and then he went off on his own, and "No Other" is probably one of the greatest underground records ever made, and it's just being rediscovered finally after decades of being... If you haven't heard it, check it out. It's deep. And
John York was here.
Yeah, and on the "No Other" track, I've got 6 basses on it. Almost the whole track is all kinds of different basses, drums, and keyboards, and his vocal on it. it was a trip and a half. But you know, for me, each person has a different thing, so each thing is different. Like if I'm working, you know, with Willie Nelson, or if I'm working with Dolly Parton, or I'm working with Joe Cocker, or you know, I mean, that's been really the litany of artists, because I've done probably around 2,600 albums.
It's just unbelievable.
So when I look at those, but each one has its own little thing. I mean, when I did 1,000 Miles with Vanessa Carlton, I mean, that was like so good. I walk in the studio and there's this little girl sitting in there playing Chopin, you know, just a beast. I mean, she's just such a great pianist. So when we got to do that record, it was like really pretty special. And
I came upon a Willie Nelson video last night by mistake. I forgot how much I adore him.
Oh, God.
He's like the most
treasure.
Soulful.
Well, check, there's an album we did called The Great Divide. And it's amazing. It's an amazing record, because Matt Serletic did it, who did Matchbox 20 and Rob Thomas's records. So it's Willie with technology also. So there's some looping in it, and then there's, you know, all kinds of people like Sheryl Crow.
That's the song I saw last night. Him and Sheryl Crow.
Well, I posted a thing from Crossroads.
That's why I saw it. It was from you that I saw it.
Yeah, and that was
amazing.
That was a fun show to do. I mean, that entire show is amazing.
They did Crazy. That was
that's
the
the
track
one I
that
posted on it.
Yeah.
But the entire show is great. I love Sheryl. Cheryl, she opened for some of our shows with Phil Collins just this past tour.
Oh, nice.
And it was great. It was, I mean, she and her band were she's just the best. And that was fun. But it's very hard to nail things down to specific tracks.
You've done so many.
Yeah, and each of them, I mean, I had a great time. I worked with Corey Wells from Three Dog Night and people like, you know, all these different kinds of people. And each one brings their own thing. And really, for me also, still at the end of the day, I'm just grateful to be a working musician more than anything. It's got nothing to do with, you know, when people ask me, you know, what records have you played on? I really have to dig, because the way I think is, what am I doing today and what am I doing tomorrow? I'm not a real archivist. I let, you know, other people. I just got sent a thing through the union. It was one of our annual little bonus check things that they give you, and it lists like all the different like TV and movie things, and I just I just put it all in my computer just so I'd have it if anybody ever asks for it. I've got at least all those.
Do you still do a lot of that stuff?
No, because those days are over. I mean, occasionally there's film being done, but a lot of the TV stuff is pretty much one or two guys just doing it all on computers. So there isn't that. But we were working all the time back in the heyday of it. I mean, Simon and the Golden Girls and all these shows. I mean, and then commercials.
Snuffy Walden, he just got another show. He's going to be doing the new reboot of 30-something.
Oh, great.
And he's wanted to work with you for a long time. So Snuffy Walden, I'm making a match
Snuffy, please. I'm a bass player. I'm desperate. Desperate.
Okay, we got more?
Yeah, there's way more. But Rick Smolke said that he did a book for Jackson Browne.
Oh, great.
For his 60th. Let's see. Carolyn Covini would like to know any gigs in Canada coming up.
God, I hope so. I love going to Canada. Nothing in the book right now. I'm hoping that once things get rolling with the immediate family, that we'll be really hitting the road hard. We've given them a window from October 12th to the end of the year to start booking a tour during that period, because that's the album will have been released at that point, and that'll be pretty close to the documentary.
I was going to say, will the documentary be done by then?
They're thinking it might be 2021 by the time that's finished, but you never know.
Right.
But I hope we come to Canada. I would love it. We did the Vancouver Island Festival a few months ago. But I would love to come east. I'd love to come to Toronto and Quebec and Montreal and all that. It's really pretty fabulous. And if things keep up the way they are here, maybe just look for a house.
Please don't. Please.
No.
There's hope.
I always have hope. That's why I'm not going down without a fight. Questions?
Yeah, we can go on all night with these. Do you still make art?
Not really. I mean, you know, by the time I'm like done with work, I have so much stuff to do around the house that that it just kind of fell on the back burner, and I kind of figured that at some point, if work really does diminish, that I might start working again.
Do you do anything mortal? Like, do you watch Netflix? Do you binge shows? Do you ever do that stuff? No, you don't.
Well, I sort of do. Like, I was watching a bunch of Botched today, about bad plastic surgery repairs. And
I've never seen that.
Oh, it's great. It's these two guys, two plastic surgeons in Beverly Hills, who basically fix all this stuff that was done bad to people.
Oh my God!
And it's amazing to watch.
Really?
How they can help people's life. I always enjoy Law and Order. My wife just binged watched Marvelous Mrs. Maisel. Or Maisel, and I watched a bunch of that, and there's a bunch of those shows, but I tend to find myself, just thinking about other things when I'm watching, and I'll end up playing Wordscape and stuff.
You get bored?
I'm part of short attention span theater. I'm always off looking for new things to do.
That's all right.
But I'd love to get back into the art. It's right now it's still on the back burner.
Are you a fan of Mark King?
Oh God, Mark! Hardly anybody better when it comes to slap. Level 42 is I love that band, and Mark is a sweetheart of a guy. I've met him before, and he's a great guy. But man, he's a badass player. Yeah. I mean, the thing I love about the bass community is, to me, it's like everybody that picks up the instrument does something unique unto themselves, from the simplest rudimentary stuff to the Jockos, and there's so many. You watch YouTube.
Is one of my oldest friends. I love the way Kenny plays the bass too.
Oh God, there's so many, and to me, I really try to think of it as like I'm fanboy at the end of the day. There's so many of these players that I just said, like Victor Wooten's a really good friend, and Steve Bailey, and I was just talking about maybe going in and being a part of their camp this year. But I don't feel competitive with them. I've kind of got my niche. And I remember like when Jocko hit the scene and all the bass players in town were running home and trying to get that Jocko thing. And I'm going, can't you spend 5 minutes and just dig a genius?
Nice.
And just sit back and watch something amazing. And I could never play like Jocko. I could bullshit my way and allude to it. But this guy was unique, and there's so many guys like that, the Brian Brombergs, and there's so many bass players, and like I said at the beginning of the thing, the bassist from the London Symphony, I watched him, but there's this other guy, I've got his name in my computer, he's a Spanish flamenco upright bass player, who's so staggering. I watch his videos, and I just sit there and I go, I never knew that instrument had it in it.
Wow.
What this guy does.
Wow.
His last name is Fons, F-O-N-S, I think. But I can't remember his first name offhand. But one of the joys of getting to this age is by the time we're through here and I leave the house, I won't remember any of this.
But the good thing is, it'll be archived, and you'll be
it's
able
archived,
to watch it.
Yeah. And if we ever do it again, it's all fresh, because I don't think we've ever done it.
That's right. Me too. That's the good part. Got anything else, Pete?
Yeah, tons. Let's see.
Pick out some jewels, because before we go, I want to have you do one more song for us, if you will. You got something else on tap?
I've got a real fun song that
Excellent.
I did with Lyle Lovett.
So how about let's see. Maximilian would like to know. He said, "Tell us about Thoroughbred, Carole King record."
It was really nice because it was the album that we did where we actually toured the album with the band that did the album. And it was like, right after Tapestry. And it had a few kind of weird moments that happened during the tour because of some personnel issues that were not within the band. But for the most part, the music was great. And I've always just adored Carole. I mean, she's just really... she's like the ultimate, Jewish mother. She just wants to make sure everybody's had enough to eat and everybody's comfy and all
Louise
that.
I just saw Louise.
I saw her there too. Yeah. And she's just a unique woman, and her writing sense and her musicality is deep. The one thing I always love is people are always going, Carol, I mean, she wrote "I Am Woman." I mean, "Natural Woman." I played on "I Am Woman," so I was thinking. I played on "It's Raining Men" too, so I've got lots of skeletons. No, but when they say, I mean, "Natural Woman," I go, well, you know, Jerry Goffin wrote the words.
Is that so?
Yeah. So a guy wrote the words to that song.
I did not know that.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, the Goffin King legacy is deep.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I knew them. I knew Jerry really well, too. And, man, what a monstrous writer and talent that guy was. So, but it was a fun tour. We really had, it was really early on. I mean, it's still early 70s. So
I actually met Carol with her Jewish mother.
Her mom was great.
Fantastic.
Yeah, her mom.
Have you seen Beautiful?
I saw it in London. The thing that I enjoyed about it was this friend of mine, talking back to great drummers, Neil Wilkinson, who I worked with Veronique Sanson, who's like the top female artist in France. I've known Vero since '73.
Wow.
And she was married to Stephen Stills back in the 70s. I mean, these things get really convoluted. But Neil was doing the orchestra for Beautiful, so he said, come to the show. And I was over there with Judith. So we went to the show, and afterwards I went backstage to see him. And he introduced me to the cast, and I said, you want to hear some stories? I said, because kind of what's going on in that, it's not quite how some of these things.
Really?
And it was fun just to sit and kind of open their eyes a bit. I mean, nothing was, horrible or alarming, but it's just funny when things get adapted for another format. You kind of go, oh, that's not exactly.
That's a little creative.
Yeah, I got a little.
Speaking of Stills, so David Crosby. So we have a mutual friend, Marcus Eaton.
Absolutely.
And Marcus was telling me that you played on his.
I played on Marcus's, and
on his father's.
Steve Eaton. Steve is a fabulous artist, and I've known Marcus and AJ since they were babies.
Gosh.
So it's just. Whenever you want to feel old, like when I'm with my friends and contemporaries, we're like, hey, we're all looking pretty good. And then suddenly you see somebody you knew as
Marcus can make anybody cry. He's just so good looking. He doesn't make anybody cry.
And he's just, he got dad's talent in there.
And the sweetest person.
Marcus is great. All these people, I mean, it's really been great.
All right, so wait, let's talk about David for a minute, because I saw the documentary that AJ made.
Yeah.
And David's kind of closed a lot of doors, Crosby, I'm talking about. So what's your relationship with him like?
We have a great relationship. But for me, my whole relationship with David has always been on just a musical friendship. We've never dealt with anything that could have become adversarial. And so, I hear about all the stories of different things, different relationships that he's had that have gone south and all that. None of that's happened to me.
Nice.
So I in the same way, like, Streisand. I mean, so many people in the business to say, well, Barbara, she's such a bitch and all this. I go, I've done a lot of work. I did Evergreen with her and all these, and Mir Has Two Faces, all these different projects with her. And the thing is...
Paul Williams played the living room.
Oh, it was probably room for a lot more people.
He did... Oh my God!
I love Paul.
He sang "Rainy Days and Mondays" and told us how he wrote it for his mother. He told us the story.
Paul
it was amazing.
Now, did you ever see the movie The Loved One with Jonathan Winters? And you know that Paul was Gunther, the boy genius in that.
Yes, I do know.
He was 25 years old when he was playing a 12-year-old.
And he could still play.
Oh, I know. I'm going to see him. We do this gig every year at the Library of Congress for ASCAP, and he's the president of ASCAP.
Yes.
So we go back in May and we do that, and I'm looking forward. That's my chance to see Paul.
So wait, tell us about Barbara. I interrupted you.
But with Barbara, when she shows up at the studio, she is 150% prepared. She puts down, man. She is like, every vocal is great. And if somebody comes in and they're slacking, she busts them for it. And then they walk away going, what a bitch. What a bitch. I go, no, if you just did your job as good as she does hers, she wouldn't say anything. But it's a weird business on that level. I mean, people get these reputations, and like Cross has got this whole other side that people talk, oh man, this cat, man, blah, blah. I go, well, I've been really lucky. I've really just enjoyed the positive side of all those guys with Graham and Stephen and everybody. I have no issues with any of these people, and I consider them all good, close friends. And when I hear this stuff, I just go, it's sad. I just don't want to hear. It's like Michael Jackson. You don't want his final legacy to be And, you know, just people talking about that the guy was possibly a pedophile.
Well, sadly,
know.
that's all that's kind of
that's
left
all that's
now.
left, and
the
you
music
think,
is gone almost.
Yeah, and you sit there. I remember seeing him in concert and going, "This is one of the best things I've ever experienced in my life." I remember working on one of the Jackson 5 records and stuff.
Oh
and
my
you just
God!
You just kind of go, "Jesus, it's just sad." And if there's truth in all of it, that's sad too, because that's criminal activity, and really it's heartbreaking. But I always looked at him as kind of neuter. I didn't really see him as a sexual entity because of the way he was raised.
Did you see the documentary? It's kind of hard.
It's really hard not to think that, and you just kind of go, man. It's heartbreaking with so many people like that, where you just go, you know, it's like I can still enjoy The Quiet Man with John Wayne, even though I know John Wayne was a complete fucking jerk off. It's hard. It's like sitting all these Clint Eastwood movies come out. He's such a great director, and he's done such good work. And I keep thinking there he's sitting there talking to an empty chair at the Republican convention, and you just go, God, why does this have to happen? You know, I hate reading books about like the making of I Love Lucy, and you find out that William Frawley and Vivian Vance didn't like each other, and he was always drinking. And no, they're the Mertzes. Just leave it alone.
I know. Marion Ross was here, and she was telling us that Tom Bosley was like mean to her all those years.
God,
it's
yeah.
like, oh no, I don't know that.
Yeah, I don't want to know that stuff. I don't want to live in a bubble, but I kind of don't want. You know, I don't want to know too much information. I just want to kind of enjoy. Father Knows Best. They say Robert Young was an alcoholic and drank all the time, and you just go, God, you know. So, another question?
Yeah, there's a lot that went through the feed.
Yeah.
Let's see. Okay, how does the music right now inspire or affect how you lay down your bass lines? That's Randy Thomas.
It's kind of. It's hard to say, because it really, once again, one of the constants that's been since I started doing this has been the song. Is everything. Now, the only issue I have with a lot of contemporary stuff that I've had to deal with is so much of it is done in Logic or Pro Tools, and I get calls to go to somebody's house and just put bass down on it. The thing that made the old records that we worked on so engaging was the fact that it was a room full of creative people feeding each other. And there was an energy and a synergy that took place in the room. You'd be maybe working on a song and you go, God, bridge kind of, so let's work on a better bridge, or let's do an intro. When I show up now, even though we're doing more and more dates with full bands, but for the most part, for a number of years now, if I go to somebody's house to put on bass, I can only affect the bass part. Generally, it's to a click, so it can't breathe and it can't be organic and moving. And I think most songs need to have that, unless the song is something that, with a click, is exactly in the pocket where it needs to be. I'm not anti-click by any means. But I'm just sort of, it's a little disappointing that at the end of the day, all I really can do is create a bass part. And I loved being in the studio, and a guitar player would play a lick, and I go, well, play that again. And we'd work up a harmony part or something, and work off of each other. And that only happens when there's a group of musicians in the room. So, I mean, that's been kind of the hard part of
the evolution,
and devolution of some of this. But I still end up working with young artists that are so good and so talented. There's a girl named Allison Porter who I did her. She just finished a new album, which she wanted me to work on, but we were out with Phil, and I did her previous album. And there was a movie years ago called Curly Sue.
Yeah.
About the, well, she was Curly Sue.
Oh.
And she won like
one
of those.
Singing
Yeah, it was like America's Got Talent or one of those shows.
The Voice or something.
Well, yeah, she won The Voice, and then she also won like one of these shows when she was like 8. You know, when she was a little kid.
Wow.
Man, she sings and writes her ass off. I just saw her at the NAMM show. She's a real treasure. Yeah, and there's always like talent out there, so for me, I'm more appreciative when I get to go in the studio with a bunch of people that are creative and really just hunker down and do it rather than just piecemealing things together.
I like it. Pete, maybe come up with one more great question, and then what we can do, Lee, is later, since you're a night bird and I'm a night bird, we can go on the thread, and maybe you can answer some questions.
Oh, I'd be happy to.
Answer some questions to the people that ask questions.
I would be happy to do
up
that.
Here.
Yeah, I love the questions.
Mm-hmm.
Are you coming to Berkeley to do a class in bass? Betsy Broadman asks. I just grabbed that one.
I was just in Berkeley a couple of months ago,
Mm-hmm.
so I don't know. Berkeley has asked the immediate family to come.
Nice.
And do like a 3-day residence there,
Nice.
where each of us will do classes, but then also do performance things. And one thing they were kind of kicking the idea around is maybe having one or two of the like have a competition of writers, and then we would go in and record their song and show them the process. So we'll see. But I've been talking to Steve Bailey, who's the head of the bass department, about us coming back. We're going to have to sort that out too, maybe later in the year.
Cool. Anything else, Pete?
Yep, one more. Gigi, let's see. She would like to ask about the new documentary called Immediate Family.
We did that.
Oh, we did
Well, what's
that?
the question?
We need to speak our piece and keep you out of Facebook jail. I live in the Himalayas.
That's just outside of Fresno, I think.
Yeah.
They've renamed.
Chad Watson's on here. Hi, Chad. Wait, he just asked a question and I lost it. Where's Chad's? Do you have Chad's question?
I don't. They go so fast.
Chad's such a great player. Wait, let me see if I can find Chad's question. Ooh, I can't find it. You go, Pete. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut off the last question. I saw like four questions about the documentary.
That was as many as I could capture because the rest just go through the feed.
Here,
So
how did your wild solo track with the section?
Excellent question.
Okay, Chad.
It was our second album, Forward Motion, that the section did, and they decided they wanted to have me do a bass solo on it. There's nothing I hate more than doing a bass solo. I'm just not one of those guys, and that was the fun part at NAMM was I was one of the judges for a bass solo competition, and I was just going, oh my God. But I used to do this thing live, and I plugged in like all kinds of devices and just went nuts. And it was just like just flew by the seat of my pants and ended up. I have a painting that I did back. I've got it at the house, and Piltdown was a character, a wild boar from from one of the kind of acid magazines from back in the '60s. And I just called the thing Get Down, Piltdown. It's my solo on it. So it was not a lot of forethought and stuff. I just kind of just flew by the seat of my pants and went nuts. And then I would do it live. And it would always... The funny part was I would start off with an Echoplex and just start the thing really quietly with a volume pedal. And it would just... You could see people leaning in for it. And then I would flip on all these things. And I would take all the strings and just pull them out and snap them. Audience would like leap out of their seats. It was like the biggest assault on their presence as possible. But I'm glad you even mentioned it. I hadn't thought about that one in a long time.
So Lee, how about if you get yourself set up to do a song to take us out? And Pete, why don't you come over here and say hello and tell us what you're up to?
All right.
This is Pete George, everybody. He's been working hard back there. There's a lot going on in this show, huh?
Seriously, there's a lot going on. This was awesome again.
So Pete, so last weekend, Vegas.
Vegas was
How was
fun.
that? Really?
A little too much partying, yeah.
Oh yeah.
You know, go to bed at 3 a.m. and have to get up at 6 a.m. for the flight.
Ooh.
And so that was exhausting. But the shows were a lot of fun. Stand-up comedy coaching there was a lot of fun. Evan was great. We had a great time.
And what do you got? I mean, you got a show this weekend.
This Saturday, Santa Clarita, sold out already.
Nice.
Great.
And then back to Funny Farm in Youngstown, Ohio in March.
Okay.
And some other shows in between. Awesome.
Excellent.
That's a nice area back there.
Yeah.
Youngstown and that whole area.
Yeah, it's a lot of...
I love when we hit those kind of towns like Lincoln, Nebraska and Ames, Iowa and stuff.
They just appreciate it.
Yeah,
so
you're
much,
off the
right?
beaten path from all the big
tours,
and you get there, man. People are just happy campers.
Appreciative.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
It's really great. I love it.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you, Pete.
This was
It's a
really,
pleasure.
really special. Thank you.
Thank you, Pete.
Okay.
So I have a tune that I love playing with Lyle Lovett when we were on the road called "That's Right, I'm Not From Texas," and I'll play that for you.
I love it.
Play along. Here we go. Let me see if
I'm sorry that I was like, we already talked about the immediate family, because I was like, I saw like 17 questions for the immediate family. I was like, no, he already answered the questions. But I didn't mean to take it out on you. I was like telling you, no, he already talked about it.
I just felt like I was married again. I'm good.
Yeah.
One second.
Sorry. Yeah. You can say to me, I divorced thee, I divorced thee, I divorced thee. If you do it 3 times, it counts.
Right.
That's what I've been told.
Oh, I see what happened here. Hold on. The speaker
Somebody
times
named
itself
Ted
out.
Knight. I'm thinking it's not the Ted Knight, though.
No, I don't think so.
Yeah.
Ted Knight?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh,
I did an album with Ted Knight called Hi Guys.
No, you didn't.
Yeah, it was great.
Did he sing?
Yeah, we did like
What?
Pinball Wizard and Blueberry Hill.
Oh my God. That has to be one that
Okay,
you. Was there eye rolling going on during that one?
Oh, it was... I love Lyle.
Can we hear Lyle, Pete?
Check it out.
One of the most interesting artists I've ever worked with.
love is coming up. That was insane. That was, first of all, what a fabulous song. And you're...
Well, and also being out on the road with Lyle, I give him so much credit because he's one of the few guys. I mean, he takes 16 guys on the road with him when he does the large band tours. And if... Oh, this is a beautiful song of Lyle's too, but he's a treasure. You know, I mean, the first time I worked with him, it was his large band album, and like the first song we cut was the one where he goes, "Can you make it a cheeseburger?" I'm sitting there going, "What is this project?" I mean, because I was so used to all these traditional country artists like George Straits and all these people, and suddenly I'm down in Nashville working with this guy with this like eraser head hair at that point and stuff. I'm going, "Man, this is a trip."
The last question, which we never got the answer to. So, how did this start, and how long has it been since your face has shown?
Well, it was like when I graduated high school, I just kind of went screw it, and just kind of let it grow, and that was it. And then I cut it all the time at this point because it's always getting caught in my strings and stuff. I have to, it's like it's a bit of a nuisance, but. It just, it's just like one of those things. I don't even think about it until I walk by a reflective surface and I go, "Who let him in the house?" It's kind of one of those things you don't even think about it. But it's really funny. I have a great picture. At one point, William Golden left the Oak Ridge Boys, and I was doing an album with them, and so we got a great picture in the vocal booth of me with the other guys looking like it. And Loretta Lynn comes into the studio and she goes, "I can't believe they get rid of one and they find another." It was great. But and then like one of the funniest things was I was when we just did this fundraiser, Billy Gibbons sent a guitar.
I was just going to say, when you and Billy Gibbons...
Oh, yeah, it's great. But the thing that was funny was Billy Gibbons sent a guitar to be donated for the auction on it. And I was getting signed pictures from Sheryl Crow and Willie Nelson and all that, but Billy was in Europe and I couldn't get him. So I went online to look him up just to find a good picture that I could print to put with the guitar. And I noticed one of the links was a big interview with Dusty Hill. So I was kind of, I'm going to go check that out. And I open it up, and it's a picture of me with Dusty Hill's article. And so I took a page shot of it and sent it to Billy, and he just wrote back in giant script, just ha ha ha. It was fantastic. Yeah, I love those guys. That's still one of the most enjoyable shows I've ever seen. Is ZZ. Yeah. They're great. But I'll tell you, the best concert I ever saw live was Sinatra at the Universal Amphitheater, probably in the late 80s.
Wow, I saw him in the late 80s. His memory was failed. Like, he had to be prompted a couple of times.
Then it may have been a little bit earlier than that, because at least, or that night he was in. But
I saw him in New York.
It was at the Universal Amphitheater, and just the thing I loved was his respect for the song, where he would introduce every song, who wrote the music, who wrote the lyrics. He would have every soloist.
I was going to say, he
pointed out when somebody was taking a solo,
yes.
he would fade to the back of the stage rather than standing up there going, "Dig me." I mean, it would have been something to see him in his prime. Because I just saw Tony Bennett like a year and a half ago, 2 years ago. And man, it was like great. I mean, it would have been great to have seen him in his prime. But I'll tell you, for a guy in his 90s, like I went and saw Charles Aznavour on his tour when he was his 90th tour, and this guy's running all over the stage and singing, hitting everything. You just go.
I just took Pete to see the Who at the Hollywood Bowl, and I had never seen the Who live.
Yeah.
And when I used to name my favorite guitar players, and I'd be Hendrix and Beck and. Pete is now my favorite. I have never seen anybody play like that. Yeah. He was playing up behind the thing. I cannot believe what he was doing. They were amazing.
Yeah, they're great. I mean, to me, the only thing that gets rough is when too many members start disappearing from groups, and how. I mean, I love the legacy of it all, and the music is great. But and I know like Pino went out with them, and different guys. It was like seeing like Yes without Chris Squire, or seeing the music is still great, but there's this, for me, especially as a bassist, when it would be going and seeing a Cream reunion without Jack Bruce, and now I mean, it's just it gets a little bit hard, but I'm looking forward to the immediate family. We're doing a rock cruise at the end of February, and Daltrey is going to be on it.
He's amazing.
He's great. He's great, and Nancy Wilson's doing it, and I'm like a giant Heart fan. And I did a couple of things with her. She did one of those things we did at the Library of Congress, and then a number of years ago, Amit and Dweezil Zappa had a TV show, and I was the musical director on it.
Sweet.
And Nancy came on that, and we got to play with her. You know, and you just kind of go, God, she's good. Man. She's just great. Great guitarist, great singer, and everything. So I'm looking forward to that. That's going to be a lot of fun.
Well, it sounds like there's going to be lots of opportunities to see you out in the world. Look for the immediate family. What do you guys have? What's any gigs? So you're going to be...
Locally, we're not doing anything right now. We're just focused on finishing the album.
Okay.
So the guys, we cut all the basic tracks at Jackson Brown's studio, and Steve Postel has a really good setup at his house down in Culver City area. So the guys are in there finishing up vocals and guitars and everything. So it's a, you know...
And so when are you anticipating the album's going to come out?
We're trying to get this thing out. Theoretically, we're supposed to go to Japan around June, but the Olympics are going to be there, so they're having a lot of trouble getting accommodations and stuff because everything is... So we're not quite sure, but we would like to have it finished by the time we go there. But to me, kind of the beauty of everything is there's no rush. There's no rush at this point. Just make it as good as we... But man, some of the new songs are so good. It's just, I mean, all the songs are really good, but Cooch is such a fun songwriter. It's great. And I'm just, the thing that's so thrilling is to be on stage with the guys, and I'm looking around, and other than Postel, who I've known a long time, but he's probably about 10 years younger than everybody else. But to look at a group of guys on stage that I've been looking at for 50 years.
It's insane.
And everybody's at the top of their game and still hungry. And one of the things I talked with Tedesco about, Denny, he said with the Wrecking Crew, the Wrecking Crew's timeline was about 12 years. From late 50s to like 70. And none of them ever left the studio and toured with any. Hal was probably the only one who would like go to Vegas, and you know he would get marquee, you know, booking there. But he said, with you guys, you've been doing it for 50 years. You've toured with a lot of the people. You guys wrote the material that a lot of them have done and produced it. So he said it's very different. It's not like Wrecking Crew 2 coming along. This is a whole other project. It just so happens the common denominator is having Denny Tedesco, who's a brilliant filmmaker. So it's really fun. All this stuff is really good, and came, you know, to be still doing this at this point and enjoying it every day, because I've seen so many fall by the wayside with disappointment and stress and alcohol and drugs and just personal things and so many deaths. That just to be with your buds and out there having a good time.
And so is this your focus now? Are you going out on the road with anybody?
Well, I think I'll probably be doing some more gigs with Judith again. And
do you know where you guys will be, where people can catch you?
Nothing in the book yet.
Okay.
I've just been kind of focused on the album and then NAMM and all that stuff. And then tomorrow we start rehearsing for the pre-Grammy show. So we'll be working through Sunday on that, which is... I wish that's what they televised. The pre-show is so much fun.
Does anybody shoot when?
It's not televised. I'm sure they.
No, but I mean, will it end up on YouTube?
That I don't know. I don't know if there's any intention on that level. But with the Grammy show, I think they give like 8 awards. I think we get during the pre-show it's like 40 awards. I mean, we have like between 80 and 100 pieces of music to learn. For this thing. Cheche Alara is the MD on it, and the band of Vinnie Colaiuta is playing drums, and the band is great. Tim Pierce and Dean Parks, and it's just fun. It runs all day before the Grammy show, and then we all go home and we can watch the show if we want, or I'll watch Law and Order or Botched. If I want to watch Botched, I could probably just go and watch the red carpet.
Oh God! Even at the I guess even at the Grammys.
Oh, it's everywhere. It's everywhere.
Oh my God!
Just these grotesqueries. People didn't know when to say stop. So, but I love being here. This is fabulous.
Thank you so much for doing this.
Anytime. I would, if you ever want me to come back for.
I'd love you to come back.
Part 2. I would do it, and let's do a living room. I'll talk to
Judith. Yes, I would love that.
I think it would be really fabulous.
Thank you so much, everybody. This is Lee Sklar and Pete George. Thank you so much. And next week we're going to be back. Is it Bruce Flange? Is next week?
Yes,
Bruce
I think
Flange?
so.
Oh,
Next week.
great.
We'll be laughing. We'll be
Bruce
laughing next week.
It would be nice to see him under better circumstances than Ellie's.
Yeah.
So. And just remember, if you ever see me on the street.
Thank you so much. Wow.
Oh, pleasure. Absolute pleasure.
This was such a joy.
And at
Thank
least
you,
it's the right week.
Yeah, Lee did come to my door last week. He with Larry Hankin. They're both standing out there, and I'm going, wait a minute, what's going on?
Yeah, we're ganging up on you. Yeah, I'm such a genius. I forgot to actually read the date. I was so excited about coming. So. But at least I knew where to come this week, so that when I got here and had forgotten my laptop, I could drive home immediately and come back and get with my laptop.
You came here twice today. Excellent.
Jesus, what a moron!
But it was worth it because those tunes were.
Yeah, they're fun.
That was crazy to watch you play. To sit here and watch you play was thrilling.
That's fun.
Thank you all so much for joining us.
And let's answer some more questions, and we'll try to.
Well, yeah, we'll do the thing.
We'll sit here and hang for a while.
Yeah, we'll answer some questions online.
Try to
Thank
get
you
to you.
so much.